The Fall of Dragons. King of Winter. Summary. Ever since Torrhen Stark bent the knee, the North has been planning its revenge. 280 years later, Aerys attempts to burn Rickard Stark alive. He survives at the cost of his eldest son, a debt he desires to repay. The North will throw off the dragons that have kept it subjugated and show the Seven Kingdoms who are one, why you do not insult the 8,000-year-old direwolf. An Awe of Robert's Rebellion. Chapter 1, Jaime I, Burn Them All. Chapter text. Jaime Lannister's hands tightened on their grip of his sword as he watched Rickard Stark be dragged into the throne room of the Red Keep. He had been attacked as he entered the city, dragged from his horse along with the nobles riding with him and brought before the king. The other nobles were already dead and Rickard Stark was not much better. Blood streamed from a cut above his eye while his lip was swollen. His long, solemn face was emotionless, his grey eyes cold as he was forced to his knees before the Iron Throne. King Aerys Targaryen grinned down at him, looking all the world like a gargoyle, with his long uncut nails and unruly hair. Stark. Your son is a traitor. He threatened my son. He insulted my house. You cannot insult the dragon. Aerys rose from his chair with the last few words, glaring down upon him. Bring in his son. Let them see each other one last time before they die. Minutes later Brandon Stark was similarly dragged into the throne room. He was forced to his knees beside his father. His hair and clothes were unkempt from his time in the Black Cells and his left eye was swollen shut from a blow he had taken when he was arrested. He held himself gingerly, as though he had several broken ribs. What do you two have to say for yourselves? Any last words before you die? Aerys asked. Rickard tilted his head slightly and glanced at his son. Neither spoke a word. Aerys shifted, unused to anyone ignoring him. I am your king and you will answer me. Rickard shifted his gaze back to the king. Trial by combat. He said, so softly that everyone had to strain to hear him. Jaime's heart sunk in his chest as he realized what Rickard Stark had asked for. He knew what would happen now, and now both of them were truly lost. Aerys grinned and cackled maniacally. The champion of House Targaryen is Firelord Stark. You will burn like a roast on a spit. Seize him. The guards rushed forward and seized Rickard before suspending him from the rafters. On the floor Brandon Stark began to struggle. You whoreson. Give me a sword and I'll gut you. Your son stole my sister. What about justice for him? Listen here you mad king. Aerys glared at the heir to the north. You want a sword? Grab one. He nodded at his guards who bound a strange leather device around his neck. Sir Jaime, the king called and Jaime almost fainted. Your sword. He cried. Jaime nodded and drew his sword from its sheath before ascending to pass it to the king. The king nodded and threw it just out of reach of Brandon Stark. Grab the sword and you can free your father. Else he dies. With that he nodded to his pyromancer who stepped forward with a jar of wildfire in his hands. Brandon stood there watching, clearly unaware of what was about to happen. Jaime watched him though and he glanced up at the roof where two white ravens were perched. Jaime frowned. He had never seen white ravens before except the ones the citadel used to announce the coming of winter. As he watched the two ravens flew down from their perch on high and attacked the pyromancer. He stumbled back as the birds attacked his eyes and hands. The pyromancer rushed away from the mad birds, and towards Sir Jonnet Hordiari, who drew his sword and hit one of the birds out of the air. The other flew out of reach and started cawing loudly. The pyromancer stepped forward once more and threw the jar at Rickard's pyre. It landed and began to eat the wood hungrily, the flames already beginning to lick Rickard Stark's armor. At this Brandon Stark truly began to struggle. He rushed forward in a vain attempt to seize the sword, but the leather device only tightened around his neck. He growled and Jaime was distracted by the first of Rickard Stark's screams. It cut through the air like a knife through butter and Jaime quickly swallowed the bile that rose in his throat. It would do no good to show weakness now. Brandon was now bent over as Rickard's screams continued, Brandon's face purpling as he struggled against the choker around his neck. As Jaime watched, Brandon's skin seemed to darken and a howl burst forth from his lips. He watched in horror as the thing that had been Brandon Stark stood up. It seemed to be some half-man, half-wolf hybrid. It stood taller than any other man in the room and had long arms which ended in 5 vicious foot-long claws on each hand. It was a hairy, brutish beast, and as he watched it clenched its neck, causing the choker to burst off. It immediately turned and ran to Rickard Stark, leaping through the flames to save him. The weight of the beast snapped the ropes that bound Lord Rickard, and together the man and beast tumbled to the red stone floor. With Lord Rickard safe, the beast turned to the king who was perched upon his throne. The beast growled deep in its chest and took a step towards the king. This seemed to shake the entire room from the stupor that had taken over it, and the guards rushed forward to stop it. The first to reach the beast was Sir Jonat Hordiari, who was gutted and killed so quickly it was pathetic. Prince Luin Martell rushed forward to distract the beast, while the Lord Commander and Sir Barristan Selmy rushed to protect the king. Jaime shuffled his feet, unwilling to go forward but unwilling to go back. More guards rushed the beast, but it was all to no avail. With an ease almost bordering on contempt, it threw 5 the guards into the walls with a single swing of its massive arms. In the next swing it caught Luin Martell's head in its paw-like grasp and crushed his skull. The doors burst open then and more guards rushed into the room. The beast took them all on, and soon their blood decorated the walls. Everyone began running from the room, the king already whisked away. The beast turned around and his grey eyes fell on Jaime. Its eyes bore into him with a hate so intense that he felt water running down his leg. It took a step towards him but stopped when Rickard Stark groaned. It seemed torn for a moment before turning and rushing to Lord Stark's side. It picked the burnt lord up with a gentleness that belied the violence it had displayed earlier and rushed from the throne room and out into the Red Keep. Chapter 2, Droldai, the White Bull. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Sir Drold Hightower sighed as he climbed the steps of the White Tower. He knew what was coming now, what the realm had been building towards for the last few years. War. As he thought on the day's events he shivered uncontrollably. Whatever the thing was that had been Brandon Stark, it had been an absolute terror throughout the city, killing 37 guards, 102 gold cloaks and 2 sworn brothers of the Kingsguard, before disappearing to no one knows where. He mourned as he thought of his lost brothers. In his heart it kindled a burning desire for revenge, but if the army the North fielded had even 10 of those abominations, it would be one hell of a fight. As he entered the solar of the White Tower, Drold observed the state of his surviving brothers. Sir Barristan Selmy was sitting in front of the hearth staring blankly into the flames, while Jaime Lannister was perched on the windowsill, staring off into the distance, tears dripping down his face. "Boy," Sir Drold said, "are you all right?" Jaime continued to stare out of the window. After a moment's silence he opened his mouth. "It stared at me," he said. "It looked at me, it was filled with such hate. But the scariest thing was its eyes. They were Brandon Stark's eyes. Grey, cold and angry, and knowing who did this to him." The tears were streaming down his face now, the sobs bidding from his lips uncontrollably. "All I ever wanted was to be in the Kingsguard," he continued. "To be seen with knights like you and Sir Arthur Dayne, and now I'm here and I want nothing more than to leave. To go back to Casterly Rock." Drold moved forward and patted the boy on the shoulder. "Come, you swore an oath. You cannot abandon your king in his hour of need. We need to plan what to do now." In his seat by the fire, Sir Barristan stirred. "I have been raised in the light of the Seven my whole life, but I cannot deny the power of these old gods." Sir Drold snorted. "Surely you do not believe that abomination was of the old gods?" Sir Barristan looked at him with knowing eyes and nodded grimly. "I met a green man once. It was at Harrenhal, during the tourney. I was standing on the water's edge, looking towards the Isle of Faces, when a boat appeared out of the mist. It carried a green man and he greeted me. I began to talk to him of the mysteries of the Weirwood and he said something that has stuck with me ever since. He said the old powers are waking and the Starks have more to do with it than the world. I have seen a northern execution. I saw the Weirwood tree drink the blood of the criminal. Ever since then I have worshipped the faith, but respected the old gods. They have power and none can deny it. I don't care if it was by the old gods or not, what Brandon Stark did was an affront to the gods. He deserves death, and if the same affliction is found in his family, then they deserve it too." Sir Drold replied. "Speaking of Brandon," Jaime said, "have they found him yet?" No, Sir Drold replied. He was last seen in Flea Bottom. The gold cloaks are scouring the area now. A knock came on the door and Drold opened it to reveal a young page bearing a message. He passed it to the fabled knight wordlessly before fleeing. Drold opened the scroll and saw words hastily scrawled. Sir Drold. Riots have begun in Flea Bottom after a Septon tried to burn the godswood there. Requesting immediate assistance. Sir Alisa Thorne, commander of the City Watch. Drold sighed as he turned to his brothers. Riots have begun in Flea Bottom. The City Watch is in need of assistance from the garrison. Sir Jaime, you go and guard the king, Sir Barristan and I shall lead the garrison to the streets. Drold rushed down the stairs, his white cape billowing behind him. As much as he didn't want to admit it, there was a power in the old gods, the gods of the first men. In truth, their power had been steadily growing ever since Aegon finished his conquest. It had been slow by all accounts, but slowly the old gods' reach had spread south and now weirwoods could be found growing as far south as Bitterbridge. The green men could also be found wandering all around Riverlands, tending to the growing trees and defending them from rogue Septons who often tried to burn them down. As he reached the bottom of the steps he came across Sir Willam d'Ari. Sir Willam, he greeted, gather some men of the garrison, there are riots in Flea Bottom. The man nodded and rushed away. He met the men at the gates of the Red Keep, the gates that only this morning had been the site of the death of the northern lords that had accompanied Lord Stark. Their blood still stained the walls. Sir Drold had been most saddened to see the death of Eldrick Darkstark. The man was perhaps the greatest horseman to have ever lived. At the tourney of Harrenhal he had broken 24 lances against Rhaegar before King Aerys interfered, claiming the Northerner was cheating. He had been gracious in defeat, even though he had never truly lost. Then the Northerners, already angry over Aerys' accusation, were confronted with Rhaegar crowning the Lioness Dark Queen of Love and Beauty. If only, Sir Drold mused, if only Eldrick Darkstark had have won. Then no one would be in the position they would be now. The realm would be happy and content and Aerys would not have totally slipped over the edge of insanity. We need Rhaegar back, he murmured to himself as the Red Keep's garrison appeared. Together they rode out into the city to help put down the riots and hopefully a temporary end to the madness that had begun ever since Brandon Stark entered the city. Notes. Something I just want to clear up as I feel I didn't explain it very well in this chapter. After Aegon's conquest the Starks did something, I will explain what, just not right now, that began a revival of the faith of the old gods in Westeros. It means that many more small folk now follow the old gods and there is even a godswood in Flea Bottom. Weirwoods are now also growing all across Westeros, as far south as Bitterbridge in the Reach. Chapter 3, Rickard I, the Burnt Lord. Chapter text. The first thing that the Burnt Lord was aware of was the pain. It was everywhere at once and somehow seemed to be simultaneously hot and cold. His throat was parched and he groaned in pain. My lord. He opened his eyes and saw a concerned face leaning over him. Where am I? He asked the man. You're in the underground, my lord, we got you here after Aerys tried to kill you. With those words it all came rushing back. The mad dash to the city, the assault at the city gates and the subsequent burning, and his son. He struggled to get up. My lord, you mustn't move, you only inflame your injuries. The man said as he gently pushed him back down. My son, the Burnt Lord said, where is my son? The man's face filled with sorrow. He's over here, my lord. He doesn't have long left. Rickard turned his head to see his son, sprawled on the mattress across from him. He was a ghastly sight to behold. He had so many crossbow bolts sticking out of him, it was a wonder he wasn't dead yet. He also had a spearhead stuck in his side and so many cuts that he more resembled the flayed man on the Bolton's banner, rather than a human being. Brandon, he groaned. His son turned his head slightly and Rickard saw in horror that he was missing an eye. Father, he said. I'm sorry, this was all my fault. Forgive me. The Burnt Lord stirred and though his body was screaming in agony he stumbled to his feet. The man rushed across to stop him. My lord, you muse. Get out of my way. The Burnt Lord snarled as he stumbled across to his son. He knelt next to him and grasped his bloody hand. Father, promise me, you will make them pay for taking Lyanna. Make them pay for burning you. Make them pay for killing me. The burnt lord grimaced. You're not going to die today, Brandon. Brandon looked at him and his eyes shone clear. I'm going to die today. But I saved you. That's enough for me. With that he closed his eyes and rested once more. The burnt lord returned to his bed and lay down. The man came and began to wipe his marred flesh with a cool cloth. It provided little relief to the fire that burned within him though. What happened? How did we get out? The burnt lord asked the man. The man looked at him strangely. What do you remember? He asked as he continued to wipe his body down. I entered the Red Keep with the other lords. We were attacked and I was dragged into the throne room. Then everything goes sort of hazy. The man nodded in sympathy. King Aes tried to burn you alive. While you were being burned, Brandon was forced to watch, while a choker was attacked around his neck. He was choking himself to death in an attempt to free you, when apparently he changed forms into a wolf hybrid. He escaped his bonds and freed you, before going on a rampage through the city. He found his way to the safe house in Flea Bottom, where I took him and you into the underground before the gold cloaks could find you. His skin changed. The burnt lord asked. But skin changing like that hasn't been seen in over 3,000 years. The man agreed. How though? The burnt lord asked, confused. The man shrugged. I did study the mysteries of the Weirwood for a year when I was younger and I have a theory. He said after a moment's silence. Naturally, he continued, the Starks have always proven to be strong with magic, indeed it was Stark blood that began the reawakening. I think that it might have been lying dormant within him for all these years and the stress of having to watch you be burned alive woke it within him. The burnt lord shuddered at the amount of pain that Brandon must have been in to awaken the beast within. He looked at his son, who was lying peacefully, his face serene. How is he now? He asked the man. The man looked at him and walked over. He touched his neck where his pulse should have been and sighed. I'm sorry, my lord, he's passed. The fire within the burnt lord burnt so hot that it was painful. But it was a good pain, the burnt lord surmised, a pain to wash away the frivolities, to allow him to focus. He wanted vengeance. He had a blood debt that was due. He turned to the man. What's your name? He asked. Guard, my lord. Scribe a message for Moat Cailin for me. The man nodded and rushed to gather a parchment, quill and an inkwell. He gathered them and placed them on the table. What should I write? Guard asked. The burnt lord opened his mouth and Guard began to scribe. Send this on using every raven you have. To all houses great and small. I have a blood debt I must repay. There shall be no mercy for those that stand in my way. The North remembers. Rickard Stark, the burnt lord. Guard finished scratching the letter and handed it to the burnt lord to proofread. He scanned it and nodded. Send it to Moat Cailin at once. The burnt lord said and Guard rushed away, leaving the burnt lord alone with his eldest son's corpse. He struggled to his feet once more and inspected his son's body. He counted the broken spearheads, every single one. All 12 of them. He counted the crossbow's bolts, every single one. All 23 of them. He counted the cuts, every single one. All 34 of them. He counted his missing son, the first skin changer to have been seen in 3,000 years. He would repay his debts to House Targaryen regardless of the cost. He would throw them from the throne their ancestors had forged. He would avenge his son. I will avenge you, my firstborn son, I swear it by earth and water, I swear it by bronze and iron, I swear it by blood and bile, and I swear it by ice and fire. I will avenge you and cast the Targaryens from their throne. The burnt lord got to his feet and observed a bowl of water sitting on the bench in the corner of the room. He hobbled over and observed his reflection. His face was a horrible mess of melted, marred, skin. His beard, eyebrows, eyelashes and hair had all been burned away by the green flames. He was a true horror to look upon, but he was content. The burnt lord looked and didn't see his marred flesh, he looked and saw a reminder of his skin-changing son, a reminder of what he'd been and what he'd vowed to do. The burnt lord would have his vengeance. But first he had to ensure his other children were safe. The burnt lord closed his eyes and stretched his mind, searching for his white raven. Chapter 4, Jaime 2, The Mad King's Wishes. Chapter text. Jaime Lannister shifted uncomfortably as he heard the screams that emanated from behind the door. He hated this, having to guard the king while he engaged in his hideous acts. He remembered when he'd first had to stand guard while he raped his wife. We're sworn to protect her, he had hissed at Sir Jonnet Hor D'Arry. Sir Jonnet Hor simply nodded and said we are, but not from him. That was when Jaime Lannister first realized joining the King's Guard might not have been Cersei's brightest idea. The sound of footsteps echoed up the corridor and Jaime prepared to protect the king. Thoughts of Brandon Stark filled his mind and he wondered if he had finally come to exact his revenge. His heart was pounding in his chest and almost burst from sheer relief when he realized it was only Sir Gerald and Sir Barristan. They looked slightly worse for wear with Sir Gerald's armor splattered with blood and both of their cloaks were darkened by soot. Sir Gerald greeted, "Where is the king?" Jaime glanced behind him briefly and nodded towards the door. As if in answer, one of Roller's screams echoed through the corridor again. Sir Gerald did not even flinch, he just came and stood guard next Jaime. A while later Aerys emerged from his wife's chambers, almost bouncing with glee. "Ah, Sir Gerald," he cackled, "you have come back. We have much to discuss." He began to walk to his own chambers, and Sir Gerald and Sir Jaime fell into step behind him. "Have you found that monster yet?" he asked. "No, my king. It seems to have disappeared somewhere in Flea Bottom. We are searching for it with all diligence." "Good. I want all the Starks' heads. They are all traitors. I will send a raven at once." "Good." The king arrived at his chambers and settled into the plush chair behind his desk. "Rhaegar needs to return to the capital and fix this mess he has made." Sir Gerald nodded in agreeance. "I will depart tonight and find him." "Good. Leave me alone for now. I must devise a way to destroy these Starks." Both men bowed and left Aerys alone to his thoughts. Outside, Sir Barristan was waiting. "What now?" he asked fearfully. "War," Sir Gerald replied simply. "War with the North. He wants all the Starks' heads." "You realize what war with the North means, don't you?" Sir Barristan asked. "The Wolf's Moor will be shut without a doubt." "The legendary Wolf's Moor," mused Sir Jaime, "the underground river that Torrhen Stark's bastard brother, Brandon Snow, had discovered. They had developed it and used it to transport goods from one side of the kingdom to the other in much shorter times." Jaime knew a lot about it, his father had often talked about it. He had even gone as far as offering Rickard Stark's second son, Eddard, the lordship of Castamere in exchange for free use of the river. He had been most wroth when he was informed that Eddard Stark did not want the lordship and had instead accepted a holdfast in the north. What could the north offer him that he could not have tenfold of in the Westerlands, he had raged. "It will be a cost we will just have to bear until the war is over." "What of the White Eye?" Sir Barristan continued. "Another legendary northern institution, although this was legendary for different reasons. It was a group of wargs who did not want to abide by the rules the Starks had set for them. They formed a splinter group and used their skills to become the world's greatest assassins and thieves. They were just as effective as the Faceless Men, and cost just as much as well. They hate the Starks." Sir Gerald snorted. "They are more likely to side with us." Jaime laughed then. Sir Gerald glared at him. "Something funny, boy?" he said with a dangerous glint in his eyes. "Do you know who the last Targaryen king was who attacked the north?" He said, "Baelor the Blessed. Allowed the Faith militant to march against the north. None of them ever returned. Baelor died days after they attacked Moat Cailin by a spider bite. The only time those two work together is when the north is threatened." "You're wrong, boy," Sir Gerald snapped back. "Even so, we must keep an extra eye on the king. We need to fill the empty spots and bring back Arthur and Oswyl. I'll ask Richard Lunmouth and Willem D'Arry to stand in while I'm away. Keep a watch out for everything. We're dealing with more than just assassins in the dark here. War with the North means monsters in the night, as Brandon Stark proved." At the thought of Brandon Stark, Jaime shivered. At night those angry grey eyes still haunted his nightmares. He just wanted to go home now, home to Casterly Rock, back to Circea and Tyrion and away from this wretched game that the other nobles seemed to love. And what of the other great houses? Sir Jaime asked. What of them? Sir Gerald replied. They will side with their rightful king or be punished. By all accounts, Sir Barristan interrupted, Jon Arryn loves Eddard Stark like his own son. Robert Baratheon loves him like his own brother, and hates Rhaegar with equal passion after Rhaegar crowned his betrothed Queen of Love and Beauty. Hoster Tully's daughter was betrothed to Brandon Stark. Quayan Greyjoy and Rickard Stark were very close friends. All of them will have some level of sympathy to the Starks' cause. What if they join the Starks? We still have the Reach and Dorne. Sir Gerald snarled. The Reach alone can field 100,000 men. I for one fail to believe that even if those lords do declare for the Starks, that they will have unanimous support. His face softened for a bit. I will go and get Rhaegar. He will know what to do. I know Robert Baratheon. Sir Barristan replied, he loves Eddard Stark as much as you hate Brandon Stark. He will fight for the Starks even if he must fight alone. He will do his duty to the crown. Sir Gerald replied hotly. Sir Barristan smiled sadly, almost wistfully. What is duty to a brother's love? He sighed then. What is honor to a woman's arms? He added as an afterthought. Then he stiffened as he realized what he had just said. Jaime glanced at Sir Gerald and saw the man was aghast at what Sir Barristan had just said. I will excuse that breach of protocol, Sir Barristan, he said frostily. As long as I never hear anything like that again. Sir Barristan, suitably chastised, muttered a humble apology and rushed away. Sir Gerald turned to Jaime. I am leaving to go and get Rhaegar now. Protect the king with your life. Honor your oath, Sir Jaime. I will. Good, Sir Gerald said, seemingly appeased, before turning and striding away, his white cape billowing out behind him. Chapter 5, Eddard I, White Wings. Summary. Our first look at the Ned and my longest chapter so far. Hopefully this isn't too bad. I'll be the first to admit I'm not that good at writing romance. Please comment what you think. Chapter text. The boat glided along the smooth blue waters of the Bay of Crabs. Eddard Stark stood at the prow of the ship, feeling the fresh sea air on his face. Next to him Ashara Dane stirred from where she had nestled herself in the crook of his elbow. He had met her at Gulltown, he travelling from the Ree and her from Dragonstone where she was lady-in-waiting to Princess Elia Martell. They were on their way to attend Brandon's wedding to Catelyn Tully where hopefully he would get his father's permission to marry her. He smiled at her as she turned her face up to look at him. Ned, she said concernedly, what if your father doesn't want you to marry me? He laughed then. The idea that his southern-loving father would not want him to marry Ashara Dane, the sister of Sir Arthur Dane, was laughable. She scowled at his reaction and hit him on the arm. It's not funny, you know. Father is all about southern alliances. He will be overjoyed to have a good daughter related to Sir Arthur Dane. You're worrying over nothing, Ash. We will go to Brandon's wedding, I will present you to my father, and then we will get married. It's simple. Have you decided what lordship you're going to take up yet? I have. And you'll have to wait and see. Ashara poked her tongue out at him, before nestling back into his arms. You're quite lucky, you know. It's not every second son that has a variety of lordships to choose from. Eddard snorted in reply. It's only because they want free access to the Wolf's Moor and they think I can give it to them. How many lordships were you offered? 5. Tywin Lannister offered me Castamere. Hoster Tully offered me Old Stones. Mace Tyrell offered me some seat along the Mandaya. Robert, perhaps the only one to offer without expecting some form of access to the river, offered me the lordship of the Rainwood and father offered me Mount Starpoint. Castamere is said to be the second richest mines in the west. And filled with bodies. I have no intention of seeing the reigns of Castamere become the Starks of Castamere once I've displeased him. Ah, so Castamere is not the one. Eddard frowned as he realized what she was doing. I'm not talking to you about my lordship anymore. Ashara laughed and it made Eddard's heart soar. He loved that sound, it could make even the bleakest day better. He looked out towards the coast as it passed by. What I'm worried about is if your brother doesn't approve. Your brother is much more formidable than my father. I have no intention of ending up on the receiving end of Dawn. He won't interfere. He was with us when we knelt before the weirwood and were betrothed by your gods. She held up her wrist then, and the purple sleeve of her dress fell back to reveal a simple weirwood bracelet, entwined around her wrist. He remembered that night like it was yesterday. It was one of the happiest moments of his life. She appeared at the edge of the godswood like a vision sent from his gods. She was dressed in a flowing gown of purple and grey, and when she stepped out of the shadows of the towering oaks and into the moonlight she more resembled a goddess, than the human she was. He smiled at her shyly, feeling once more like the shy, young man who had to rely on the courage and smooth ways of his older brother to ask her to dance. Next to her walked her brother in his full Kingsguard armor, the legendary greatsword, Dawn, sheathed at his side. Ned's mouth went dry as he looked at him. What if he didn't approve? What if he thought Ashura deserved better than a second son? What if? "Hello, Ned," she said. Eddard Stark swallowed and stared stupidly. "I know you told me he was quiet, sister, but I didn't realize he was this quiet," Arthur Dayne said after a moment of silence. "You look beautiful," he finally managed to sputter out. She smiled at him, her purple eyes twinkling with laughter. Behind him Howland Reed leaned in. "You know how stupid you look right now, right?" he whispered in his ear. Ned turned around and glared at him. "Shut up," he hissed. He turned back to Ashura who was making her way to his side. She reached and extended her hand. He grasped it in his hand and together they made their way before the heart tree of Harrenhal. "So how does this work?" she asked him as she squeezed his hand. "We kneel before the heart tree and wait. It might not work, but if we are still then they are said to work faster, but if it doesn't work we don't have to worry because most people can get married without one of these. It's just if my father wants." He was abruptly cut off by Ashura placing one of her fingers on his lips. He caught himself, realizing he had begun rambling in his nervousness. She pulled on his hand and together they knelt down before the terrible carven face. Behind them Howland Reed and Arthur Dayne took up their positions as witnesses before the old gods. They had been kneeling for barely a minute when he felt drywood sneaking its way in between their intertwined palms. Next to him, he felt Ashura stiffen in surprise and shock. The wood crept up and around and bound their wrists together. Ned's heart soared as he realized the gravity of what was happening. The gods were ordaining and blessing a marriage between him and Ashura Dayne. He felt the wood stop moving and a wind whistled through the trees. Opening his eyes, he turned to Ashura, who still had her eyes clenched tightly closed, unsure of what had just transpired. "Ash," he whispered, "you can open your eyes now." She opened her eyes and turned to him smiling. "It worked?" she asked. "It worked," he agreed. He helped her to her feet and turned to see a shocked Howland Reed and confused Arthur Dayne. "I was under the impression that these things went for a lot longer," Arthur said with a frown on his face. Ashura frowned too and turned to Ned. "He's right. You told me that it could take all night and still not work." Howland Reed stuttered forward. "Ned," he breathed, "what just happened is unheard of. The shortest I've ever heard of anyone kneeling was 5 hours. You were there for barely a minute before the gods started to move." He rushed forward to inspect the weirwood knot that bound their wrists together. He looked at it closely before pulling his obsidian knife from its sheath on his hip. "Do you want me to cut it?" he asked. "No," Ashura replied, "leave it. I want to remember this, I want to savor every moment." She smiled at him again and clenched his hand in hers. She stepped forward and the next thing he knew her lips were gently brushing his. His lips still tingled from the phantom memory of that kiss. Lifting his own arm up, his sleeve fell back to reveal his own weirwood bracelet entwined around his wrist. "It was funny when I showed my brothers and sisters this," Ned said as he inspected the weirwood. "It inspired Brandon and Lyanna to attempt to get someone to kneel before the gods with them so they wouldn't have to honor their betrothals." Ashura frowned at him. "I thought you told me this was a requirement for most northern betrothals." "It is. Father's southern proclivities outweighed his duty to his gods in this case, however, much to the disgruntlement of more than one of his bannermen. Lord Riswell was particularly upset as it was well known that Brandon and his daughter Barbary loved each other." "That's a shame. Didn't they kneel before the gods?" My father banned Brandon from doing so. He said the North needed the Southern alliances that only marriage could bring. I can't imagine Brandon just accepting your father's commands. He seemed too wild for that. To be honest, he didn't at first. He declared he was going to ride to the Rilsang kneel before a godswood and by his own words allow the old gods to decide. Father chased after him, and when he returned all talk of marrying Barbary was dead. Instead he was going to marry Caitlin Tully. What did your father tell him? I don't know. Neither of them ever saw fit to tell me. Ned looked out over the waves, wrapped in thoughts of his elder brother, when he first noticed the white raven winging its way towards him. He watched it curiously as it alighted on the railing next to him. With a shock, he realized it was his father's raven. Ned. It caught. Ned. Ned pushed Ashura out of his arms and stepped towards the bird. It had a scroll tied around one of its legs. Ned. Ashura asked, did that bird just say your name? Ignoring her, he reached out a hand to grab the scroll. He unfurled it and began to read. Ned. Your brother is dead, murdered by the Mad King. He rode to King's Landing after finding out that Roriga kidnapped Lyanna. I have been horribly scarred. I'm hidden in King's Landing at the moment. We're planning to smuggle me out in a week. Aes has called for all our heads. I've already sent a message to Moat Cailin and the Northern Banners have been called. You are the heir to Winterfell now, and you need to return home. I will go straight to Winterfell and marshal the entire army. You go to Moat Cailin and lead the vanguard into the Riverlands. You need to convince Jon Arryn and Robert Baratheon to fight for us, not the Targaryens. Hopefully I'll see you soon. Father. His heart pounding in his chest, he glanced at Ashura, who was looking at him concernedly. He turned back to the White Raven. Father? He asked. Yes. The bird caught. I'm on a ship to Solpans at the moment. We're meant to arrive by this afternoon. I can be at the Eyrie within 5 days if I ride hard. From there, I'll catch a ship to the Wolf's Moor and take the vanguard south. Good. The bird said. With that it stretched its wings once more and flew back across the water. Ned slumped to the deck of the ship, the scroll clutched tightly in his hands. Breathing heavily, he thought on what his father had just told him. Brandon was dead. Brandon couldn't be dead. He started breathing heavily, beginning to panic, when Ashura's voice cut through the haze within his own head. Ned, what's wrong? She asked as she knelt down next to him. He glanced at her fearfully. Ashura, when we get to Solpans you need to go home. Home? She asked, what about Brandon's wedding? What about presenting me to your father? It's been called off. He managed to choke out. Called off? Ned, what happened? What does that scroll say? He didn't answer, just pressed his lips tightly together. Gently, she reached down and eased the scroll from his shaking hands. There was a moment of silence while she read it, before she slumped down next to him too. Oh Ned, she breathed, I'm so sorry. She pulled him into her arms and began to stroke his hair. Her lips brushed his forehead, but strangely it did not make him feel good. All Ned could think about was Caitlin Tully, promised to be the next Lady of Winterfell. Ashura, you need to go back to Starfall. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going with you. She held up her arm then to show him her weirwood bracelet then, and it made him want to cry. The stupid, stubborn, beautiful girl, why did she have to make this so hard? Ashura, I promise I will come to Starfall as soon as the war is over and marry you. If we lose however and you're with me, you're going to suffer as well. Like a stubborn mule, she shook her head again. No. I'm coming with you. Ned sighed and went to argue further before she interrupted him. Shut your mouth, Eddard Stark. You took me before a weirwood and your gods blessed us. I'm not one to deny the gods, and neither are you. I will stay with you to the bitter end, even if it leads to death. Ash. No, don't argue. I'm coming with you, at the very least until I'm assured you're going to be safe. Eddard Stark went to argue further, but she stopped him with another kiss. It tingled the same way that first one had, all those nights ago, before the smiles died. Chapter 6, Jon I, Dark Wings. Summary. Ned has to make a hard decision that upsets Ashura. Please comment and tell me what you think. Chapter text. The booming voice of Robert Baratheon echoed throughout the lonely halls of the Eyrie, as Jon Arryn sat in his solar contemplating the contents of the letter before him. The door to his solar swung open to reveal a veritable giant. Strong, 6.5 feet tall and muscled like a maiden's fantasy, Robert Baratheon strode in and sat down across the desk from Jon. "So Jon," he said as he reached for the goblet of wine on his foster father's desk, "what did you call me here for?" Jon reached out and snatched the wine goblet from Robert's hands before he could lift it to his lips. Wordlessly, he passed him a letter, the letter that doomed them all to war. Robert frowned and took the letter from him. He watched Robert's face as he read the letter, switching from shock, to disbelief, to anger, to the fury that the Baratheons were so famous for. His jaw clenched and his face reddened. To Lord Jon Arryn, Lord Paramount of the Vale and Warden of the East. Rickard and Brandon Stark are hereby denounced as enemies of the realm and were executed for treason. Prove your loyalty to your rightful king and bring me the head of your ward Eddard Stark. Aerys Targaryen, King of the Andals, Rhoynar and First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm. He calls for Eddard Stark's head. What's wrong with the man? First his son dishonors my betrothed, then he kills my best friend's brother and father, and now he demands his head as well. Enough is enough, I say. Let's call our banners and throw these dragons from their throne. That's not all. Jon handed Robert another letter, the letter that Rickard Stark had sent himself. To Lord Jon Arryn. No doubt by now you will have heard of my demise. I assure such tales are false. Brandon rode to King's Landing after hearing that Rhaegar had kidnapped my daughter Lyanna. Aerys did attempt to kill me and Brandon, but we were able to escape. Brandon died later of wounds sustained during our escape. It is time, once and for all, to end the Targaryens. It is time to enact the plans we have been making for the last few years. Rickard Stark. Robert's countenance became even angrier. Rhaegar, kidnapped, Lyanna. He managed to choke out. A vein began pulsing on the side of his head. His face purpled and he slammed his hands down on the desk. Where's Ned now? Let me lead some men to go and get him. I'll get Ned, we'll call our banners and crush the skulls of those that stand in our way. Ned was meant to be on his way to his brother's wedding. I have no clue where he is now. Last I heard he was meeting someone in Gulltown, before heading to his brother's wedding. We need to get him back. He'll find his way back. Robert stood up and walked to his solar's window. He stood there, hands clenched on the sill, staring out the window. I will not let anyone harm Ned, he said lowly. The man is more a brother to me than Stannis or Renly will ever be. I would rather revolt against Aerys than hand him Eddard Stark's head. Jon. Robert suddenly exclaimed as he pointed out the window, look. A white raven flew in through the open window, alighting on Jon's desk. That's the bird that used to follow Ned around when he was younger. Jon said as he looked at it curiously. Jon. It caught. Robert jumped in shock. The bird hopped forward and Jon saw a scroll attached to the bird's leg. With trembling hands he reached forward and grasped the scroll. He pulled it back and opened, and when he saw who it was from he almost collapsed in relief. Jon. I am on my way to the Bloody Gate via Solpans. I will meet you there. Worry not, for the moment I am safe and aware of the situation regarding the king and my brother. I should be there within 4 days. Ned. He handed the letter to Robert and put his head in his hands. Ned was safe. That was good. Now came the waiting game. 5 days later and Eddard Stark ascended to the gilded halls of the Eyrie, with an unexpected, and in Robert's eyes unwelcome, visitor on his arm. Lady Ashara Dayne had barely left Ned's side from the second they had arrived. They were all gathered in his solar now, even Lady Dayne, much to Robert's consternation. She could be a spy for the Targaryens. Robert had ranted. Lady Dayne, much to her credit, had fixed Robert with a steely, cool gaze and promptly informed him that if she was working for the Targaryens she would have slit Ned's throat on the way here and be done with the whole sorry business. Jon couldn't help but admire her in a way. Not many would be brave enough to stand up to a blustering Robert. Which was precisely why the letter he had received from Hoster Tully was only that much more painful to deliver. They were all sitting around his table now, Ned in front of him, Robert on Ned's left and Lady Dane on his right. He fingered the letter from Hoster Tully in front of him. Robert was scowling heavily at the girl who was just staring at him, totally ignoring Robert. Ned, he began. In war, we have to make hard decisions sometimes, decisions that might not make us happy, but will ensure the safety of those we love. You know what, I'm doing a horrible job at this. Just read the bloody letter yourself. He passed the letter to Ned, who opened it and started reading it. Lady Dane and Robert read over his shoulder, and the contrast of their reactions would have been comical if the nature of the letter were not so shattering. Lady Dane's face was aghast, while Robert looked supremely smug and overjoyed. I cannot, he said after he finished reading the letter. Robert snorted then. Believe me, Ned, when I say I'm overjoyed you've finally found an interest in wenches, but aside from between the sheets they don't have much use. Marry the Tully girl, get her father's troops, and you can use this wench as a mistress. Even John winced at the glare that Ned sent Robert's way. I have no intention of becoming your mistress, Ned, Lady Dane said as she grabbed his hand. Surely Lord Tully will understand if you tell him that he would be condemning his daughter to a loveless marriage. I love you, Ned, and I promised you I would stick by you to the end. Please don't do this. Ned glanced at Ashura before looking back to John. What do you think? He asked. John winced. He knew what Ned wanted to hear, but it wasn't what he needed to hear. Ned. He sighed. You have a duty to your house. You have a duty to ensure that we will win this war. Hoster Tully has the troops we need. It is the hardest thing to give up what we love for our duty, but love is a luxury only afforded to the small folk. Marry the girl, I say, marry her and be done with it. I am sorry it's not the life you want, but by all accounts Caitlin Tully is a beautiful girl. Your life with her would be far from unhappy. Ned sighed and put his head in his hands. How many troops do the River Lords bring us? It's unsure, because some could revolt, but it could be about 10,000 troops. Ned sat up and looked at Ashura Dane. Ashura, he began. John is right. She scoffed and stood up. I can't believe I let myself be tricked by you. I thought you were a man of honor. She screeched. She reached to her wrist and went to tear off what looked like a weirwood bracelet when Ned reached forward and grasped her hand tightly. Let go of me, she yelled as she hit him with her free hand. I do have a duty, he continued, but it's not to the Tullys. Immediately she stopped struggling and looked at him. What? She asked in confusion. I do have a duty. But it's not to the Tullys. It's firstly to my gods, the gods of the Weirwoods, the old gods. His tone shifted, grew softer. The gods that betrothed us. He smiled at her. Then it's to my family. Then to my house. Then to my king. You fool. Robert boomed as he stood up and walked out of the room. Ned, John said, I'm happy for you, truly, but you may have just doomed our war effort. Ned shook his head. How many men do we need to defeat the Targaryens? Well, the Reach will attack the Stormlands, so if Storm's End holds against the Tyrells, then at least 40,000. If they don't, then we will need at least 100,000. How many men can you field? Before or after the Loyalists' revolt? After. 20,000 if I stretch it. Good. Then we'll have enough. Enough. We will have nowhere near enough. How many men do you think the North can field, John? You said it was 20,000. I lied. Well, how many is it? The North's full strength is 140,000 men. Ned, you've never been one for japes, now's not a good time to start. I'm not japing. I'm being serious. We've hidden our strength because we didn't want anyone else knowing. The Starks have been planning the Targaryens' demise for almost 300 years now. John saw he was being serious, and suddenly Ned Stark's decision to not marry the Tully girl didn't seem so bad anymore. Chapter 7, Robert I, The Stark Storm's End. Summary. This is just a short chapter, healing the rift between the two friends. Chapter text. Robert left his best friend in a fury. How stupid was the man? He felt the primal urge to smash something, preferably Rhaegar's chest, but that Dornish wench's face would do just fine too. How would Ned like her then? Growling deep in his throat, he entered the armory and picked up his favorite warhammer. He walked out into the practice yard and began laying into the practice dummies with a fury he hadn't felt in ages. Lyanna, his Lyanna, beautiful, sweet, gentle, lovely Lyanna, the Lyanna that was his, had been kidnapped by that incest-riddled dragon spawn. When he was finished, all that was left of the dummies was piles of straw and broken wood. He nodded satisfied, when he saw Ned watching him from the other side of the courtyard. Thankfully the Dornish wench wasn't with him, so he went over to him. "Robert," Ned greeted. "Ned!" Robert exclaimed as he pulled him into a big hug. "It's good to know you're back safe. You're not angry at me?" "Bah, I could never be angry at you, for too long. I love your grim, boring countenance too much for that." He felt Ned relax in his arms and pulled back. "Although I still think you're being stupid. Is that girl really that good in bed that you've decided you want her every night?" Ned blushed a furious shade of red. "I've never, you know." "You've never what?" "Dishonored her," Ned whispered. Robert burst out laughing. "Well, what do you see in the girl then?" "I like her," Ned replied simply. "Well, let me tell you something I've learned from all my experience. If you stay with the same woman too long, she can become boring very quickly." "Robert," Ned hissed at him, "you're betrothed to my sister." Robert darkened as he thought of his Lyanna being held captive by that dragon spawn. "And she will be my queen," he hotly replied. "I swear to you, Ned, I will kill Rhaegar for what he has done to your brother and sister. I will smash his head in with my own hammer. I don't care how many men he brings, I will just keep killing and killing till he's dead and all his supporters are dead. Can you imagine it? It'll be you, me, a few pretty wenches, some good fights and lots of food and drink." Ned laughed quietly. That sounds like your idea of a good time. Did Jon tell you the Graftons declared for the Targaryens? The Graftons of Gulltown. We're going to be heading down there in a few days to take back Gulltown. Are you going to come? No, I need to get home. If Gulltown's out, I guess I'll have to go to the Fingers for a ship. Oh well. I'll see you when we're ready to end it. Take care, Robert. You too, Ned. I couldn't bear to lose you. I would rather lose Stannis or Renly. Robert grasped Ned in a hug once more and pulled him close. The next time he saw Ned, it would be in the battlefield, hopefully, with Rhaegar's blood staining his hammer. Chapter 8, Tywine, I Hear My Howl. Summary. Another short chapter. This one from Tywine. Please leave your thoughts. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Tywine Lannister smiled as he read the burnt wolf's letter. To all houses great and small, I have a blood debt I must repay. There shall be no mercy for those that stand in my way. The North remembers. Rickard Stark, the burnt lord. It seemed Aerys' humiliation was nigh. He had waited and endured all Aerys had thrown at him for years now. Endured the humiliation to his own beautiful Joanna, endured the slight against Cersei, and endured the humiliation of having his eldest son and heir stolen from him. But now it looked like he would be finally able to repay his debts to House Targaryen. It seemed Aerys had angered the wrong man in Rickard Stark. A brave man to be sure, but stupid too, stupid and easily maneuvered in the Game of Thrones. He would let them fight it out and side with the winner. If Rickard won and put a new king on the throne, he would offer Cersei as a betrothal. If Aerys won, he would throw him from the throne himself and put Rhaegar on it, under the condition he take Cersei as wife. Either way, House Lannister's legacy upon the Iron Throne would be assured. The door opened and Kevan Lannister, his younger brother, shuffled in. He was a dutiful man, Kevan, everything a younger brother should be, much more able than that japing fool Geryon. Tywine, a letter from Aerys has arrived. Tywine smiled. He had been expecting for it some time now. And what does our gracious king want of us now? Kevan handed him the letter as he sat in the chair across from him. To Tywine Lannister. I demand you call your banners at once and march against Rickard Stark's barbarian heathens. I hope you do delay, for I have no need to remind you that your son is currently in my custody, and as such any delay on your part will not go well for him. From Aerys Targaryen, king of the Andals, Rhoynar and First Men, lord of the Seven Kingdoms and protector of the realm. Tywin's jaw clenched as he read the letter. He dared to make demands of him. After all he had done. And to threaten his son. Tywin hoped that Ricard's forces would win. He wanted to see Aerys' legacy crumble to ashes at his hands. With the letter still in his hands he walked over to the fire burning in the hearth and threw it in. "Call the banners," he told Kevan. "If it's Lannister troops Aerys wants, it's Lannister troops he'll get." Kevan rushed out the room to do his bidding. Oh yes, Tywin would enjoy watching the fall of House Targaryen, he would enjoy it very much. Notes. Next chapter we check in with Arthur Dayne. Chapter 9, Arthur I, The Sword of the Morning. Summary. Rhaegar receives the news of what's going on King's Landing. Chapter text. Arthur ran his whetstone down the great sword Dawn, even though the blade did not require sharpening. It was a habit born of the days before he wielded such a legendary sword, and it helped him to think. He was so lost in his thoughts he did not hear the horse's arrival until it skidded to a stop in front of him. He looked up into the grim, lined face of Sir Gerald Hightower, Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. "Lord Commander," he greeted as he got to his feet. "Arthur," the Lord Commander replied. "Where is Rhaegar?" Arthur turned and gestured to the tower behind him. It was called the Tower of Joy, though for the life of him Arthur could not figure out why. It was a lonely, desolate place, surrounded by deserts and scrub, and falling into a state of ruin. In there. Is she with him? She, the Northerner. The one who had made Rhaegar forget his vows to Elia Martell, one of the most beautiful and kind people Arthur ever knew. In his youth he had loved her and she him. He had wanted to marry her until her mother informed him that the second son of a bannerman was not of high enough standing for her Elia. "I." The White Bull nodded his head. "Come, we must speak with him." "Where is Sir Oswyl?" "In there with him now." Together the two ascended the tower's steps. They stepped through the doorway and into the shade of the tower, where they found Sir Oswyl lying on the floor, sleeping. The Lord Commander strode forward and poked him in the stomach with his foot. The man jumped awake and went to grab his sword, only stopping when he realized who it was. "You should be more careful, you know. If I didn't realize who you were I would have killed you." "Lucky I was only pretending to sleep, I." "Of course," Sir Gerald replied dryly. "I see the Dornish sun hasn't made you lose your wit, Oswyl. Pfft, takes more than some heat and sand to fell the bravest knight of the Kingsguard." Arthur laughed at the japing fool that was his friend. It was good to laugh like this. He didn't think he had laughed at anything other than Oswyl ever since Harrenhal. Harrenhal, where all the smiles died. "Curse you, Rhaegar, curse you for putting me in this position." As if he had heard his name, the man himself entered the room, ascending down the rickety staircase that led to the room where she lived. "Sir Gerald. What are you doing here? Maybe we should talk outside, my prince." "Of course." Sir Arthur helped Sir Oswyl to his feet and followed the Lord Commander and Rhaegar out the door. When they were a safe distance away from the tower, Sir Gerald stopped. "Why have you come here, Sir Gerald?" Rhaegar asked. The words that spilled out of Sir Gerald's mouth chilled Arthur to the bone. "Brandon Stark showed up at the Red Keep 3 weeks ago. It seemed he had somehow received word that you had kidnapped his sister. He rode in the gates with other sons of the North and demanded that you come out and die. Aerys had him thrown in prison and called his father to answer for his crimes. When his father came he had him arrested for treason and then attempted to burn him alive. Brandon Stark turned into a monster and freed them both. They got away. Lewin Martell and Jonnet Hordari were killed in their escape. Aerys then declared he wanted all the Starks' heads and wrote to Jon Arryn to give him his wards, Eddard Starks. No, Arthur thought. Not him. Please, not him. His mind was filled with thoughts of Ashura and a screaming weirwood that moved in the wind. Jon Arryn refused and instead called his banners. The North has called theirs as well, and are marshalling at Moat Cailin. Your father needs you back to deal with the mess he made. You said Brandon turned into a monster. What did you mean? Rhaegar asked. He was half man, half wolf. A terror to look upon and a terror to fight. He killed 2 Kingsguard, 37 guards of the garrison and 102 gold cloaks. Roriger smiled. I was right. Hers shall be the song of ice and fire. The magic of the north with the magic of Valyria, two powerful bloodlines united at last. Inside Arthur seethed in anger. His kingdom was at war and all Roriger could think about was his prophecy. Your father has ordered you to return and put down the Starks, Sir Gerald said. Roriger turned and looked up at the window of the tower. Arthur wanted to scream then. The kingdom was at war. How many sons must be resigned to death all for this man's obsession with prophecy? With a start Arthur realized it was madness. It might not have been as pronounced as his father's but it was there nonetheless. Roriger turned to him then. Arthur, he said, my oldest and dearest friend. You once said you would aid me in deposing my father. When this war is done, will you stand by me? I will. Arthur said with a certainty that he wasn't feeling on the inside. Sir Oswell, will you stand by me? I will. And you, Sir Gerald? Will you stand by me against my father? I will, my king. Good. Then we have much to do. Roriger turned to where their horses were saddled and began to prepare his horse. Here is what we will do. I will ride to King's Landing to lead the armies against the Starks. Hopefully I can end it peacefully. You three will stay here to guard the girl. Your Grace, we are sworn to you. You need protection. And I shall be fine. The girl is of utmost importance. She is pregnant. Arthur stilled as he realized what Roriger had done. Roriger, he hissed, you are married. Roriger looked at him and without even batting an eyelid nodded. Yes. But I am a Targaryen, the rules are different for us. Disgust welled up in Arthur. Where was the boy he had grown up with? Where was the man who wanted to put an end to the madness? But your Grace, Sir Gerald said, at least let me accompany you. No, Roriger said. Sir Gerald went to argue further but Roriger cut him off with an angry snap. You just swore fealty to me as your king. Now obey me as your king. Sir Gerald nodded and stepped back, although the look on his face suggested it left a very bitter taste in his mouth. I will put an end to this madness, Roriger said as he swung astride his saddle. Look after the girl. With that he turned the horse and spurred it on its way. He turned to see the girl in the doorway. Sir Arthur. She called, where is Roriger going? He wanted to hurt her then, to make her cry for what she had done. To make her regret ever allowing Roriger's honeyed words to convince her to leave. He goes to war. He replied. War? War with who? The Starks. In the doorway the girl registered what he had said and slumped to the floor. A wail burst forth from her lips, filling the air with a song of sadness that not even Roriger could achieve. As he watched her, thoughts of Elia filled his mind and he wondered if this was how she felt when Roriger ran off with a child. Chapter 10, Ashura I, The Misty Mountains Cold. Summary. Some more Ned Shura. Hope you enjoy, tell me what you think. Chapter text. The mountains of the moon were easily some of the most breathtakingly beautiful mountains Ashura had ever seen. This did not, however, take away the pain of the biting winds that cut through to Ashura's bones and led her to shivering in her furs most nights, wishing for the warmth of the man that often slept only feet away. With her and Ned were two of Lord Arryn's household guard, who were to ensure that the both of them reached the Fingers safely and protect them from the clansmen who often frequented these mountains. The three of them had been traveling for 3 weeks now, having left the Eyrie at the same time as Lord Arryn, who was marching on Gulltown. Robert Baratheon had gone with him too, though not before giving Ned another lecture on his opinion of the Dornish wench as he referred to her. Her thoughts soured as she thought of Robert Baratheon. He was a great fool and she worried for the state of the Stormlands under his rule. She shivered again as the winds rose around them and held her hands out to the small campfire that Ned had made when they set up for the night. Why did it have to be so cold? The sun-kissed lands of Dorne seemed a distant memory right now. She fondly remembered the days when she and Arthur used to splash and play in the Torrentine. Days when the sun was so hot, you burnt your feet just running across the sand and into the cool water. She wondered where Arthur was now. Was he with his Silver Prince? Did he know where the girl was? Warmth suddenly spread through her body as a pair of arms encircled her and pulled her into Ned's warm embrace. She hummed in comfort as his warmth spread through her chilled limbs. He wrapped his heavy fur cloak around them both as he pulled her closer. Whether it had been his northern heritage or the fact that he had been living in these mountains since he was 8, Ned did not seem to be as affected by the cold. She relished the closeness of Ned and burrowed deeper into his side. He smelled of pine and snow and smoke, a smell that she had come to cherish in the time they had come to know each other. "Is it this cold in Winterfell?" she asked as he held her hands in his, transferring his warmth to her. "No," Ned replied. "Hot water is constantly piped through the walls from underground springs, making the entire castle warm. When you're cold, you can go into the Godswood and swim in the pool beneath the Heart Tree. It's fed by an underground hot spring. In winter sometimes Brandon used to get." Ned smiled sadly at whatever memory was running through his mind and then shook his head, like a dog shaking off water. "But that doesn't matter anymore. I want to swim in that pool one day," Ashura said, hoping to take his mind off Brandon, but it didn't work. What did Brandon say that night? She doesn't need to ask what night, there could only be one night that he could be speaking of. She remembered it as if it was yesterday. "He asked me to dance with his younger brother," she replied. "That's it?" "Yes." "Why? Is something wrong?" There was a pause as Ned stared up at the sky. "My whole life I was living in Brandon's shadow. He was the heir, the confident one, the outgoing one, the apple of my father's eye. The handsome one. Everything was meant to go to him, and even though it was wrong there were days when I wanted what he had. Everyone always preferred him to me, and then you came along. You were the first person that looked at Brandon and passed him over for me. I always wondered if he promised you something more, an incentive to dance with me." "You mean did I take him to bed?" In the starlight she could see the blood rush to his face. "Yes," he whispered back hoarsely. "No, I never did." "Why? I now have everything that was meant to be Brandon's. I'm just wondering if it was worth the cost." "Ned, you can't think like that." "I know. It doesn't change the fact I do though. Ned, if you think like that you'll get nowhere." She reached up and ran her finger along his jawline. "Ned, Brandon's gone. It's what's happened. You have to move on, you have to be there for your family and your house. You need to step up." She smiled then. "Brandon's not there to ask the pretty girls to dance with you anymore. It's all up to you now. Bear it like I know you can. I promised to stand by you and fully intend to keep that promise." Ned smiled bitterly as his eyes continued to rove the stars above them. "Ned," she said. "Look at me." The stubborn fool refused to move his eyes. "Ned, look at me." He still refused, so she pulled away from his embrace and grabbed his face in both hands, pulling it down until his soft grey eyes met her own. "Ned, I love you." She watched in amusement as he blushed. She leant forward and kissed him deeply, deeper than she had ever kissed him before. Tentatively she pushed out with her tongue, and was surprised to feel Ned's lips melt away before her touch. It was beautiful, his smell and warmth and feel invading her senses when a cough pulled her from her thoughts. Ned pulled away as though struck, and inside she wanted to curse and smack whichever of the two guards had interrupted them. She turned around and glared daggers at the man standing on the edge of the clearing. A very embarrassed man with the falcon of House Arryn stitched onto his tunic held up a brace of rabbits. "I got dinner, Lord." "Thank you," Albar Ashura managed to spit out. "I'm sure we will enjoy it very much, though not as much as I was enjoying Ned's warmth," she thought bitterly. Next to her Ned mumbled something along the same lines, and it was obvious he was embarrassed about the whole affair. That night, instead of shivering in her own furs, she went over and lay down next to Ned. To her surprise he did not protest, instead he pulled her closer. For the first time since leaving the marginally warmer Uri she slept contentedly. Chapter 11, Eddard 2, The Misty Mountains Cold 2. Summary. The end of the journey through the mountains of the moon. Please leave a comment and tell me what you think. Chapter text. He wrapped his arm around her waist and savored the feel of her beneath his hand. Her body seemed to melt beneath his touch, molding itself to his touch, and her lips seemed to be made especially for him. She had kissed him 3 times now. The first time was at Harrenhal. The second time on the ship in the Bay of Crabs. The third, last night, had filled him with a fire he didn't know he had in him. Is this the wolf blood, he wondered? Is this what Brandon felt like every day? He looked down at her sleeping face and smiled. Her mouth was opened slightly and her nose was scrunched up tightly. Her raven black hair framed her pretty face and he wondered what she saw him in. Eddard Stark was plain, long-faced and boring. Ashura Dane was beautiful, funny and confident, in short everything that Ned was not. She stirred in her sleep and pushed her head closer into his chest, burrowing deeper into the furs they shared. Next to the campfire, Albar stood and shook out his limbs. The moon had reached its zenith, meaning it was Ned's turn to take watch. He gently extracted himself from Ashura's grasp and slipped out of the furs. He wandered across to where Albar stood watch and loosened his sword in his scabbard. "You see anything?" he asked the grizzled guard. "No. The clansmen have been quiet lately. I'll take a quick piss and then go to sleep." "Sure." Albar wandered away into the trees to make water and Eddard took his place, perched on the stone next to the campfire. He pulled his sword from his scabbard and rested it on his knees. He looked up and watched the stars. His thoughts were interrupted by a sound from the bushes in which Albar had disappeared. "Albar!" he called out softly, getting to his feet and creeping forward. The lack of response chilled him to his bone. "Albar!" he called louder. A shape flew out of the bushes and landed in front of him with a wet splat. He looked down to see Albar's head, eyes glassy. His head snapped up and he yelled half in shock, half in warning. A looming shape charged out of the bushes yelling a war cry. Ned brought his sword up and blocked the clansman's axe. Unexpectedly, the clansman struck out with a fist that caught Ned on the side of the head, and he stumbled back, stars flashing in his vision. Denies, the other Vale guardsman saved his life, seeming to appear from nowhere and pushing the clansman back. Ned shook his head and helped Denies push the man back, when two more clansmen emerged from the bushes. Ned's superior weaponry and training soon proved and both of them were lying dead on the end of Ned's blade. He went to help Denies when he was interrupted by a scream from behind him, a high-pitched woman's scream. "Ashura!" he thought with worry as he turned around to see a clansman dragging her by her hair. His blood rushed and he flew across the ground to slam into the clansman. They grappled on the floor and in the madness Ned had lost his sword. He managed to get on top of the man and punched him in the face. He felt the man's nose crunch beneath the impact and blood began pouring from it. He didn't stop though, and kept punching and punching and punching and punching until all that was left of the man's face was a jumbled mess of blood and flesh and bone. Panting with exertion he turned to Ashura. "Are you all right?" he asked. She stared at him with shock. Ned felt lightheaded suddenly and Ashura rushed over. "Ned, you've been stabbed." He looked down in bewilderment to see a vicious dirk sticking out of his side. "Oh," he said, "so I have." That was the last he remembered before the darkness overtook him. When he came to, days later, he found himself in a darkened room, a cool cough wiping his head. He groaned at the pain that blossomed in his side when he moved. "Ned," a voice said and Ashura's beautiful face filled his vision. "You're awake," she exclaimed as she hugged him tight. He groaned in discomfort as her arms struck where he had been stabbed. "Oh," she said as she pulled back realizing what she had done. "I'm so sorry." "Where are we?" "Coldwater. Denies has gone to get us a boat. He should be back soon." "Ashura, you have to go home now." She smiled at him, amused. "Haven't we already had this argument?" He frowned at her. Why did she have to insist on being so difficult all the time? "You are not coming with me," he asserted. "I will not let you on the boat." "Oh really? And who's going to stop me?" "I will." She lifted her finger and placed it right where he had been stabbed, pushing down with the lightest pressure. He squirmed in discomfort. "Exactly," she said, "you're not going to have much luck stopping me with that wound." "Ashura," Ned growled at her, "I'm not letting you come with me any further." "Whatever, Ned," she said dismissively as she got up to get him a cup of water. She held the cup to his lips and he drank deeply, quenching his parched throat. "Why must you be so difficult all of the time?" he asked as he scowled at her. She laughed at him. "I'm difficult. You're quite difficult yourself, you know." He had to scare her away, he decided. That was the only way she would go. "Ashura, it's going to be dangerous crossing the bight at this." Any more dangerous than wandering the mountains of the moon with you getting attacked by savage clansmen? Assure you. Ned, I've told you once and I'll tell you again. I love you and I fully intend to stick by you until the end. Gods forgive me, Ned thought as he spoke. Well, I don't love you. He snapped back. She looked at him, her eyebrow raised in query, and leaned forward. Her lips met his again and his resistance crumbled beneath the touch of her soft lips. And then, as quick as they were there, they were gone again, and Ned opened his eyes to see an amused Ashura looking down at him. An admirable effort, Lord Stark. You weren't a very good liar when I first met you and you haven't improved since. I'm coming with you and that's the end of the story. With a note of finality she got up and left the room, leaving him to stew on the stubborn, annoying woman whose lips were as soft as the sky. Chapter 12, Robert II, The Battle for Gulltown. Chapter text. Robert Baratheon roared with laughter as he smashed his massive warhammer into the Grafton soldier's chest. The man flew backwards, off the ramparts of the walls of Gulltown and into the streets below. Now this was life, Robert thought. This was when a man was either made or broken. Battle stripped away all the frivolities, all that was unnecessary, and reduced to his base emotions. The greatest warriors were those who could master their base emotions and channel it into the fight. Another man charged him on the narrow walkway and he attacked him with glee. His shield crumpled before his warhammer and soon he was lying broken and bleeding beneath his feet. More! Robert bellowed as he whirled his blooded hammer above his head. Bring me more! As if in answer, Mark Grafton himself stepped from the mass of defending troops, his sword drawn and shield raised defensively. Traitor! Robert bellows as he pointed his hammer at him. Submit now or die! Wordlessly, Mark settled into a defensive crouch and smacked his sword upon his shield. The challenge was clear. Robert laughed as he stepped forward, swinging his massive hammer like it weighed as much as a feather. The first of his hits smashed into Lord Grafton's shield and cracked the wood. Grafton responded with a swing of his own, only to be rebuffed by Robert's own shield. Robert swung again and hit Grafton's shield again, cracking the shield in half. Grafton threw away his ruined shield and put both hands on his sword. A man, most probably one of Lord Grafton's guards, rushed forward to defend him, only to have his skull caved in by Robert's hammer. Robert roared with laughter again and swung his hammer back at Grafton, who attempted to catch it on his sword but failed miserably. Robert swung his hammer again and it crashed into Grafton's chest. The man flew backwards, literally into the arms of his troops, gasping for air as his crumpled chest struggled to inhale properly. Robert charged into the line of troops without pause, laying waste to the men with giant, sweeping swings of his hammer. Soon the line crumpled and Jon Arryn's loyalist forces were well and truly on the verge of taking the city. As the line pulled back, Mark Grafton's lifeless body was revealed, lying on the cobblestone streets. Robert slung his hammer over his back and picked up the Lord's lifeless body. He slung it over his shoulder and climbed the wall of the nearest house. Once he was standing on the roof, he held up the body for all the Grafton soldiers to see. Your lord is dead. Your walls are broken. Submit and we will be merciful. Fight on and I assure you I will send all of you to the seven hells myself. Robert boomed. Gradually but surely the soldiers stopped fighting and soon bent the knee to Jon Arryn, who, while an old man, had acquitted himself bravely throughout the battle. As he watched Jon, Robert's thoughts turned to the rest of his foster family. He wondered if Ned had made it through the mountains of the moon yet. He wondered if he had bedded the Dornish wench yet. Only Eddard Stark would refuse to bed a girl who clearly wanted him. Only Eddard Stark would be so honorably foolish. Only Eddard Stark. Robert. Jon called out as he noticed him standing on the sidelines. Come here. Robert made his way through the thronging masses of celebrating soldiers to stand by his foster father's side. Well done, Jon said as he tightly embraced him. You've made me proud. They say you slew Mark Grafton yourself. I caved in his chest with my warhammer. Jon sighed. The fool wanted war, and it was war that he got. Thankfully his son has bent the knee without a fight. Regardless though, Robert, I've already made the arrangements regarding your ship. You leave in the morning. See Captain Grolios over there. He'll tell you all about it. Robert nodded and made his way to the captain Jon had pointed out. Soon he would be home, home to gather his army, and then he would have his chance to kill the man that stole the love of his life. Chapter 13, Eddard III, Storm to Sisterton. Summary. Ned finally escapes the Eyrie. Is it a case of out of the frying pan and into the fire though? Please comment and tell me what you think. Chapter text. Lightning crashed, thunder boomed and the waves rose and fell around them. The rain poured down in sheets, chilling Eddard Stark to the bone. His long hair was plastered to his face, as he huddled beside Ashura in the bowels of the rickety old fishing sloop. It was a horrible storm and many times Eddard had feared their boat would be overwhelmed. To the fisherman's credit however he had managed to keep the boat afloat. He glanced down at Ashura who had her knees clenched to her chest, and her hands were clenched around the boat's railing, so tightly that her knuckles were going white. Another wave crashed over them, drenching them with salt water. The salt water had managed to get into his stab wound and it was beginning to itch like crazy. The boat listed horribly and fell down a steep wave and his stomach felt like it was in his mouth. Ashura switched positions suddenly and clutched his arm with all the might of a woman who thought she was about to die. Ned almost laughed at the irony of the situation. He was a wanted man in Westeros and he was about to die by drowning. It was especially amusing when he realized Aes had tried to kill his father using fire. He looked over at the fisherman who was struggling to reel in the sail. Behind him a giant wave loomed, easily 14 foot tall. Ned shouted out a warning but his cry was lost to the howling winds. The wave crashed over the boat, and the boat was under and all Ned was aware of was the water that filled his sense and the hands that clutched his arms. The boat managed to resurface but it was listing heavily. To Ned's horror the fisherman was nowhere to be seen. Ashura was still clutched to his arms and he noted the tears that streamed down his face. He went to stand, to take the fisherman's place at the tiller but Ashura tugged him back down. Ashura! He screamed over the wind, you have to let me go. I need to take the tiller. She opened her eyes and saw the fisherman was gone. Her eyes widened in horror and she stood with him as he went for the tiller. They stumbled forward and collapsed next to it. He grabbed the tiller and yanked it straight to stop the boat from listing. Something must have been wrong below the waterline though as the boat only shifted a little bit. Ned looked out, hoping to see some lights but the waves had risen around the tiny craft and it was in danger of being swamped again. He yanked on the tiller and managed to scale the wave before it broke its crest. It was when he was sitting on the top of the wave that he first saw the lights. They were far off, to his west and he swung the tiller hard and towards the distant lights. He kissed Ashura on her forehead. Don't worry, he whispered into her ear, I can see lights, I'm heading for them now. She nodded wordlessly without even opening her eyes. For the next few hours Ned and the small fishing boat battled their way through the raging seas. When they finally arrived in the port, their boat was listing heavily and to Ned's horror he recognized where he was. Sisterton. These men would be just as likely to sell him to Aes as they would be to return him home. This was not a safe place to be. He looked down at Ashura and realized she would be in danger too. Ashura, he said as he pulled her upwards from where she lay, Ashura, take the tiller. She nodded, her eyes glassy as she stared off into the distance. Ashura, he said as he shook her. If anyone asks, you're a fisherman's daughter, okay? Your father died on the way here and you took over the boat. Ashura nodded and Ned's heart almost broke. She looked so broken and such a far cry from the strong woman he knew she was. They pulled up onto the sandy beach and Ned helped Ashura climb down from the wrecked boat. They made their way into the narrow streets of Sisterton and found a gloomy inn. Ned opened the door and was immediately assaulted by the smell of fish, sweat and ale. He wandered in, Ashura following, and walked over to the innkeeper. 2 rooms and 2 bowls of whatever hot food you have, Ned said as he laid some coins on the counter. The innkeeper looked at him suspiciously before picking the coins up and pocketing them. He pointed to a dark table in the corner and Ned went and sat down. Ashura sat down across from him, her face downcast. Ned watched as the innkeeper wandered over to a man and exchanged words with him. The man nodded and got up and left. A pit of despair rose in Ned's belly. What if he was going to get Lord Borrell? The innkeeper appeared then clutching 2 steaming bowls of fish stew. It wasn't nice, but it was hot and for that, Ned appreciated it all the more. He was halfway through his bowl when the guards stormed through the doorway. They made a beeline straight for him and Ashura, and he knew he was finished. "You're coming with me," the guard said as he hefted his sword. "Lord Borrell wants words with you." Ned sighed, resigned, and got to his feet. It felt wrong to go like this. He just had to hope that the gods were watching him. Ned refused to believe that his gods had gotten him through that storm only for him to be taken back to Eris at Lord Borrell's wishes. A hand filled his suddenly, and Ashura's broken visage hovered behind him, attempting to hide from the glares of the soldiers. "Who's she?" he asked harshly. "The daughter of the fisherman that got me here," Ned replied in a tone that brooked no argument. The guard nodded and poked him with his sword. "Come on, Lord Borrell's waiting." The guards marched him out of the inn and up the stony crags towards Breakwater Castle. They entered the grand hall to see Lord Borrell sitting on a great stone seat, his son, Gardrick Borrell, to one side, his maester to the other. When Ned entered, the Lord burst out laughing. The guards were right. "You do have the Stark look. Since the eldest is dead, the youngest in Winterfell, I'd say you are Eddard Stark." Ned was sick of the game, he just wanted to go home. "Aye, my lord," Ned said resignedly. "I am Eddard Stark, son of Rickard Stark." Lord Borrell frowned, confused. "You're not going to deny it?" "What for? I've always been told I'm not very good at lying." Lord Borrell laughed again. "Very smart, Lord Stark. Now tell me, should I send you to Eris or on to White Harbor? See my maester here. He wants me to send you to Eris to curry favor." Ned shrugged. "You can send me to Eris if you want. Just pray my father never finds out I was here." Lord Borrell shifted in his seat and leant forward. "So the rumors are true? Your father is alive?" "Alive? I'd heard he sent a letter to every lord he could." "Did you not receive one?" "I did. I assumed it was a bluff." "No. My father is alive." "Oh well, alive or not, I don't care. I'm going to send you home, Lord Stark. However, if you lose, you were never here. Am I clear?" Ned nodded, hardly able to believe his luck. "There is a boat leaving for the north in the morning. Until then the inn is still open." Ned nodded and turned to Ashura, who was still standing behind him. He hugged her, forgetting for a moment where he was. "Who is she?" Lord Borrell asked. "The fisherman's daughter. He perished in the storm and she got me here." Lord Borrell nodded and dismissed them with a wave of his hand. The guards took them back to the inn where they were staying. Ned took Ashura and walked up the stairs to where the innkeeper said their rooms were. To Ned's surprise, Ashura didn't even try and enter his room, she just went straight to hers. He bid her good night and went to his own room and lay down. He couldn't stop thinking of Ashura and how broken she had been ever since the storm. It seemed nearly dying had cracked something within the beautiful girl. He missed her warmth in his bed, a warmth he had grown accustomed to in the times they had shared furs while traveling the mountains of the moon. He got to his feet and stumbled over to his door. He opened it and crept over to Ashura's door. He knocked softly and put his ear to the door. He heard movement on the other side, and soon Ashura was standing in front of him, dressed only in a sleeping shift. She looked at him with those haunting purple eyes, and for once he saw no spark of laughter in them. "Ned?" she asked softly. "What's wrong?" Wordlessly he stepped into the room and shut the door behind him. He lifted his hands to her face and cradled it in his hands. Leaning forward, he pressed his lips to hers, and it seemed to awaken something within her. Her fingers curled into his chest as she returned his kiss. He kissed her like she had kissed him in the mountains of the moon, and then he felt her hands tugging him to her. She pulled him to the bed and pushed him down onto it before sitting down on top of his legs. She continued to kiss him, the tongues warring with each other. Each time their skin connected, he felt so alive, alive like he hadn't felt since before he had heard that Brandon was dead. Ashura pulled back and she began to pull Ned's shirt off. "Ashura, wait," Ned said. She paused, looking down at him. "Is this what you want?" he asked. She smiled then, and the spark returned to her purple eyes. "Oh Ned," she said. "This is all I've ever wanted." Chapter 14, Rickard 2, White Harbor I. Chapter text. The Burnt Lord watched as the ship that he had been smuggled out of King's Landing in pulled up at the pier. The city was obviously preparing for war. The ships were all beached, and in process of being cleaned and refitted. The sounds of steel stirring steel came from the many smithies within the city, and all arriving ships were being thoroughly searched to find spies. Looking up, the burnt lord noticed the eagles that watched over them all. No doubt their handlers would be watched over safely in the wolf's den or another secure location. As he watched, an eagle spotted something it didn't like and swooped down to accost a man who had done something. Seconds later, the snowcloaks, the soldiers who patrolled and guarded the entire north, appeared from the crowds thronging the harbor and took him away for questioning. The boat stopped moving and the burnt lord moved to where the gangplank was being lowered. Lord Wyman Marndale was waiting for him when he ascended from the ship's deck. Lord Stark Wyman said as he stepped forward, his enormous girth filling the narrow pier. "It is an honor to host you. I offer my most sincere condolences for the loss of your son. Do not fear, Lord Stark, the men of White Harbor will not forget what Aerys has done. We will not let this insult against the Starks stand." Ricard pulled back his hood and watched as Lord Marndale blanched and flinched away from his horrible visage. "Do not worry, Lord Marndale. My eldest son died in front of my own eyes, and I cannot look at my own reflection without being reminded of his sacrifice. I will not let the insult stand, even if I have to stand against Aerys alone." Lord Wyman nodded, still struck at the extent of his scars. "Come, Lord Marndale, report to me on the readiness of the Eastern Navy. I want to know everything." Lord Marndale nodded and fell into step beside him as they walked towards the Wolf's Den, the military base of the East. House Stark held 4 castles, and the Wolf's Den was the first, and least, of them. The other castles were Mount Starpoint in the west and Moat Cailin in the neck. The fourth was Winterfell itself, the ancient seat of the Kings of Winter. "We have called all the ships back from patrol and have managed to consolidate 70 ships on this side of the Wolf's Moor. Their crews are all present and prepared for an extended engagement, and we are just finishing refitting the ones we were using for trade now. By next week the entire Eastern Fleet will be ready to sail. The Warg Legion of Starpoint have sent down 5 wargs, each of whom use a sea eagle as a companion, and on top of that we have a warg of our own who bonded with a blue whale. We also have 10 boats already out patrolling the Bight, looking for incursions from the Royal Fleet. Have you heard any word from my son Lord Marndale?" "No, Your Grace, we have given strict orders to all ships to keep an eye out for him, but there was a fierce storm not 2 nights ago that could very well have sunken his ship." Ricard snarled at the thought. "My son did not die at sea, Lord Marndale, and I suggest you never say so again." Then in a lower voice he said, "I have already lost 1 son, I have no intention of losing another. Put out every ship we have available until he's found." "At once, my lord." Lord Marndale gestured to a guard and gave him the appropriate instructions. Ricard was distracted by the lithe, young man striding confidently towards them. "Lord Ricard," he boomed as he engulfed him in a hug, "I'll say you've seen better days." The burnt lord cracked a smirk. "That I have, Byrne, that I have." Byrne Saltstock, Lord of Saltmoor and Admiral of the Eastern Navy, released him from his hug and pulled back to get a better look at him. Byrne was one of Brandon's friends from the days of the Wolf Pack. He had been raised on the ocean his entire life, and when the opportunity came for him to captain his own ship at 17 years of age, he had taken it with both hands. He had quickly risen through the ranks due to his excellent skills and had been named Admiral of the Eastern Navy only a year ago. He was 26 now and a powerful lord in his own right. If anyone understood Brandon and what Ricard had lost, it was the man standing in front of him now. "Brandon was my dearest friend, Lord Stark. I know I do not have to tell you how much his death saddens me. I Byrne. It saddens us all. Business now, Byrne, though. I need to convene with all the lords at Moat Cailin. Can you organize a ship to take us through the Wolf's Moor when my son Eddard gets here?" Byrne Saltstock bowed his head in deference and ran off to do his bidding. He had a good head on his shoulders, Byrne, and he would make a good lord one day, perhaps even Grand Admiral of the Northern Navy. Lord Marndale rushed forward, having finished given his instructions to his guard. Ricard turned to him. "Summon all the captains to the Great Hall of the Wolf's Den. I will have words with them." Lord Marndale nodded and rushed away to do his bidding. Lord Ricard made his way alone to the Wolf's Den, an imposing structure of stone and steel. It had everything required to house the eastern arm of the North's army. It had a shipyard, a stable, a walk vault, and it sat on the eastern side of the White Knife, ensuring that none could pass deep into the north without the Starks knowing about it. The grand hall was a modest one and extremely martial. The only decorations were 2 Stark banners hanging from the walls beside the hearth. The captains were already gathered by the time he got there. There was 57 of them, so he assumed some were late and the others were out patrolling the Bight. "Captains," he said as he ascended the platform and sat in the carved seat that acted as throne. They bowed their heads in deference and murmured replies. Many were transfixed by the state of his face and openly stared. Ricard didn't care. Let them see, let them look upon my visage and see what Aerys has done. Let my face fill their nightmares so they don't forget what we're fighting for. They all stood watching expectantly, waiting for him to give his orders. "Captains of the ships of the East, look at my face. See the scars and remember when you go into battle. This is what we are fighting against. If we lose this war, this is the fate of us all. Aerys knows no mercy. As such, we shall know no mercy. Take every ship you see. Put their crews to the sword. Take no prisoners. Give them the same mercy Aerys was prepared to give me and my son. Am I clear?" The men nodded. "Good. I promised my son I would avenge him and I intend to see that promise through." Chapter 15, Eddard 4, White Harbor 2. Summary. Please leave a comment and tell me what you think. Chapter text. They had left in the morning. The ship was a smuggler's vessel belonging to a man named Tristan Stone. Thankfully the storm had ended and they were quickly on their way and streaming across the choppy waters of the Bight. Ashura stood next to him, her arms clasped around his waist, her head resting on his shoulder. Last night seemed to have awoken her from the stupor that had consumed her since they had left the Fingers. Last night. Ned felt funny thinking about it. It made him feel warm inside, and instead of just his lips tingling with a phantom memory, it was his entire body. It had been glorious. He had tried to apologize when they woke up and his face still hurt from where she had slapped him. Ned opened his eyes to see Ashura staring at him, smiling softly, her purple eyes twinkling. "Someone enjoyed last night," she said with a smirk. To his shame he felt the blood rush to his face and somewhere else. He looked down in embarrassment and noted she was still naked, a fact that didn't help the blood rushing around his body. "Ashura." He managed to stammer out, "I'm so sorry." "Sorry," she said with a frown. "Sorry for what?" "For dishonoring you. I shouldn't have." She sat up so quickly Ned was almost knocked off the bed. Her haunting eyes had lost their twinkle and were instead replaced with a cold fury. She raised her hand and slapped him hard. "What was that for?" he asked as he clutched his burning cheek. "You dare to apologize as though what we did was wrong." "But it was." She slapped him again, even harder this time. He clutched his face and glared at her. Why did she have to be so confusing? They spent a moment like that, just glaring at each other before Ned averted his gaze. "I'm sorry if I upset you by apologizing," Ned said. He was met with silence and a stony glare. "If it means anything, I did enjoy it." Her gaze softened then and she smiled at him. She had kissed him again then, and before he knew it he was spending himself in her again, much to her pleasure if her grunts and moans were anything to go by. Afterwards they had lain together, a tangled mess of wet hair and sticky limbs, and worshipped each other's bodies with their mouths. It had been a morning and night of absolute bliss, and if Ned could spend the rest of his life in the cramped little room that stunk of fish and sweat and sex, he would have done so. The beautiful girl smiled at him now, and for the life of him he could barely take his eyes off her. "What are you thinking about now?" she asked. Ned blushed. "Last night," he whispered. Her smile grew wider then, to reveal her pearly white teeth. She grabbed him and pulled his ear down to her mouth. "There's more where that came from," she said. Her warm breath tickled his ear and left his blood running around his body again. Ned and Ashura were interrupted by a cry from the crow's nest at the top of the mast. "Sail to starboard." The captain, a short, squat, black-bearded man, pulled his Mirish spyglass from his vest and held it to his eye. "It's flying your father's banners, Lord Stark," he informed them. "Be cautious just in case it's a ploy from the Targaryens," Ned said as he checked the sword at his side. The captain held out his spyglass for Ned to take. "Do you recognize anyone?" he asked. Ned held the looking glass to his eye and inspected the crew. None seemed familiar to him until he saw the man standing on the command deck, a looking glass held to his eye as well. As he watched, the man lowered his glass and started waving at him, a great big smile etched onto his handsome face. A smile split Ned's face as he watched his friend make a fool of himself in front of his crew. He lowered the spyglass and raised his own hand in reply. "Do you know them?" the captain asked. "Know them? Me and Burn Saltstock are familiar." "That's Burn Saltstock?" the captain exclaimed, staring at the distant ship with shock. "Who's Burn Saltstock?" Ashura asked with a frown. "Was he at Harrenhal?" "Who's Burn Saltstock?" the captain exclaimed. "You don't know Burn Saltstock? He's only one of the greatest captains to have ever sailed the Bight. He's the Lord of Saltmoor, the eastern mouth of the Wolf's Moor, and an admiral of the Eastern Navy. In short, Ashura, a very impressive man, and a very close friend of the Starks." Ned finished, noting the deepening furrow of her brow. The ship cut through the water, until the two ships were across from each other. "Ho!" Burn called out in his booming voice. "Your father has mobilized the entire fleet to search for you. Have you seen him?" Ned called back. I've seen the Burnt Lord. I'll warn you though, Ned, he's changed. Harsher, less relaxed." Ned grimaced. "I'll meet you in port. We'll talk further there." Burn nodded and turned to his crew, who immediately began preparing his boat to return to port. Ned turned to his own captain. "Take us to White Harbor." A few days later and they were pulling into White Harbor. His father was standing on the pier to greet him, along with Lord Marndaley and Lord Seastook, who had somehow managed to beat them back. His father's face was covered by the cowl of his cloak and he wore full plate armor that covered his entire body. He had heard his father was scarred, but he couldn't see anything that seemed out of place. Next to him, Ashura clutched his hand tightly. She was worried that his father would force the marriage to Caitlin Tully on him. She had confessed as much to him last night as they had lain together. He gave her hand a squeeze and kissed her forehead. He had promised her that he would do everything in his power to ensure that he could marry her. When she had asked if he would disobey his father's direct command, he stumbled over his words and shook his head. She had smiled sadly, kissed him on the head and promptly told him that that was why I fell in love you. The captain lowered the gangplank and Ned descended to greet his father, Ashura following in his wake. "Father," he said in greeting as he bowed his head. To his great surprise, his father engulfed him in a bear hug and began sobbing into his shoulder. He patted his father on the back and warmly embraced him back. After a while his father pulled away and stepped back. He reached up and pulled back his hood to reveal a horribly burned face. Next to him Ashura screamed in shock, and behind him he heard the sound of one of the sailors retching. He stared upon his visage and realized why Burn had called him the Burnt Lord. "Did Brandon suffer like this?" Ned asked as he gestured to his face. His father's face became filled with such sorrow, fury and anger that Ned was almost taken aback. "Your brother sacrificed his life to save mine. His sacrifice shall not be forgotten. I have taken out a blood debt against Aes. I intend to take from him what he took from me, and then some more." "My lord," Ashura said as she stepped forward. Ricard frowned at her. "Who is this, Ned?" "Father, this is Lady Ashura Dane. This is the lady I wrote to you about before Brandon's wedding." "What, she stayed with you from Solpans?" Ricard asked incredulously. Ashura stirred. "I stayed by his side as I promised I would. I traveled with him to the Uri through the mountains of the moon and almost died attempting to cross the Bight with him. Do not underestimate my love for your son. I fully intend to marry him once this war is over. Regardless, I have a favor to ask of you. My close friend, Princess Elia Martell, is innocent of any crimes committed against your family. I ask that you spare her life and that of her children." Ned looked at his father fearfully, but to his surprise saw amusement and admiration dancing in his father's eyes. It was swiftly replaced by a cold gaze, however, as he watched, and his heart sunk. "Ah yes," his father said. "I remember your dear friend. She was present the day I was burned. Every night I see her and 100 others in my dreams. They are laughing and mocking as I was burned alive and my son was forced to watch. I have sworn to kill all who watched me burn that day. There will be no exception for your friend, or her incest-riddled children. With that his father turned and stormed away, leaving him to console Ashura. She looked up at him fearfully. Please don't let any harm come to them, she begged. They are innocent in all this. It's all right, he said as he stroked her hair. I promise to do all I can to protect them. Chapter 16, Eddard v. the Bitter-Burnt Lord. Chapter text. Byrne turned to him, his normally jovial face twisted in a grimace. I did warn you, he said as he watched Rickard Stark's retreating figure. What he's been through has changed him. Ned nodded and continued to cradle Ashura in his arms. Ashura, he said. She looked up at him with her twinkling purple eyes and smiled sadly. What? She asked. You're going home now. Home to Starfall. Ashura rolled her eyes at him. How many times are we going to have this argument? She asked. He rolled his eyes right back. This time it's not an argument, all right. You're going home. I will not let you stay here to be used by my father as some sort of pawn in his quest for vengeance. Ned turned to Byrne. Byrne, can you organize a ship to take Ashura home? I'm going to go and speak to my father. With that Ned turned and hurried down the pier after his father. He caught up with him in the streets of White Harbor, halfway to the Wolf's Den. His father acknowledged him with a quick nod as he fell into step beside him, but he otherwise ignored him until they entered the war room of the fortress. I received a letter from Hoster Tully when I arrived back. He wants to know if I will still honor the betrothal between the Starks and Tullys, his father said as he watched him with his steely grey eyes. I know, Ned replied, his heart sinking in his chest. He wrote to Jon Arryn too. And Ned pulled back the sleeve of his tunic and showed his father the weirwood bracelet wrapped around his wrist. His father's gaze softened and he stared at the bracelet sorrowfully. Brandon wanted one of those desperately. I told him no. If I had just said yes, maybe he'd still be with us now. Maybe, Ned replied, though probably not. Brandon always had the wolf blood. What did you tell him though that made him decide to marry the Tully girl? His father glanced at him, guilt etched into the burnt lines of his face. It doesn't matter. It does. First you wanted to marry Brandon to the Tully girl, then Lyanna to Robert. What were you planning? War or something? The guilt and surprise in his father's eyes told him all he needed to know. You were planning for war, he exclaimed incredulously. What madness led you to pursue that course of action? It doesn't matter anymore. Doesn't matter. Ned almost yelled, it cost my brother his life. That stirred a reaction from his father. He flew from his seat and grabbed Ned by his throat. He threw him back against the wall hard, knocking his head so hard he saw stars. Listen here, you insolent little pup, only one man was responsible for Brandon's death and he is sitting in King's Landing. As I've always told you, summer is the time for squabbles. In winter, we must protect one another, keep each other warm, and share our strengths. We are in winter now, and I require your total support. Once this war is done you can condemn and hate me then, until then I expect you to fight for the pack as any dutiful son would, as Brandon would. He shoved him in the throat once more, before pulling back and resuming his seat at the head of the table. He sat down and gestured for Ned to take a seat. Ned did so, his throat still burning from where his father had grabbed him. Now, his father began, the lords have convened at Moat Cailin. We will be traveling there with Byrne on the morrow. The girl will not be coming with us, regardless of your bracelet. Ned went to protest, but his father held up a hand. You do however have my permission to marry her once the war is done. Ned stopped. What of Hoster Tully? If he's smart he'll stay out of my way. If he's not, then I'll show him that this burnt lord still has bite. Chapter 17, Rickard III, Meeting at the Moat. Summary. The Northern Lords meet at Moat Cailin. Sorry I didn't upload yesterday, I was just really tired. Chapter text. Saltzmoor first appeared as a distant smudge upon the horizon, but soon it could be clearly and it made Rickard swell with pride. It was an eternal reminder of the men who had held these lands for 8,000 years, his ancestors, the kings of winter. From solid rock, a giant direwolf's head had been carved. The river spilled from its moor on the evening tide, and on the morning tide rushed in. Fires burned in the direwolf's eyes, providing a guiding light for all ships in the evening. As they watched a howl cut through the air, made by the giant horns inside the wolf's nostril, warning the defenders of the Saltsmoor of the ship's approach. In the port to the side sat the ships that had been on the wrong side when the river was shut. Next to him Ned stirred. "I'll never cease to be amazed by that." "Me neither," Ricard said as Byrne strode up beside them. "Nothing as imposing as a giant stone wolf's head, hey?" Byrne said with a grin as he clapped Ned on the back. Ned smiled. "You always knew how to make the imposing seem humorous. I grew up in those halls, and when my father dies I will rule those halls." Byrne laughed. "To me it's nothing more than home." Byrne's father, Brandon Seastock, was an aged older man who was considered among Winterfell's most loyal bannermen. Their house was founded by Torrhen Stark's second son, Otto Stark, who upon receiving the Saltsmoor fortress, dubbed himself the Salt Stark. His family took the name and ever since carried it as theirs, along with the title, Lord of Saltsmoor. As they passed beneath the shadow of the salty wolf's jaws he looked up to see the numerous murder holes covering the narrow entrance. A man moved up next to Byrne. "My lord, I should take control from here," he said. Byrne nodded and handed the tiller to him. He took it and began guiding the craft through the twisting turning river. Perhaps the river's greatest defense was its natural geography. Many a ship had come undone attempting to get through its narrow, twisting halls. Truth be told, very few knew the secret of traveling the hallowed halls of the Wolf's Moor. Those men, one of who was steering the boat now, were known as the pilots, and were raised from birth traveling the river. Each pilot took only one apprentice in his entire life, and when the pilot died, his apprentice would take his place. The apprentices were handpicked by the Lords of the Moor and met with the Lord of Winterfell himself before he could begin. Ricard remembered turning many a boy down that he didn't feel would be able to make it, but for every 5 that failed, 1 would pass. The darkness enveloped the ship, only being cut by the lanterns that hung from stern and prow. The stone walls rushed past with dizzying speed. Ricard had traveled this river more times than he cared to remember, but each time he was still left with a pounding heart at the speed of the river and the fearlessness of the men who rode it. Byrne turned to him. "It's best you get some shut-eye. It's a long ride to the Wolf's Eye." Ricard nodded and went and lay down at the prow of the ship, wrapping himself in the grey cloak he had come to wear constantly ever since he was burned. Hours later he was roughly shaken away by a hand and opened his eyes to see Byrne standing over him. "We're almost there," he said. "I didn't want you to miss the sight." Ricard nodded and got to his feet. Ned was already standing on the prow, eyes searching the darkness in front of the boat. He moved to stand beside him and searched the area around him, looking for the light that betrayed the presence of the eye. "How did the girl take what I said?" he asked him. Ned glanced at him out of the corner of his eyes. Ashura was happy and upset. He replied it was confusing. "She's a woman. They're meant to be. Gods, sometimes your mother left my head spinning in circles." Ned smiled. "There it is," he said as he pointed out into the darkness. Ricard's gaze followed the direction his arm was pointing and caught the light as well. A single shaft of light pierced the darkness and soon the sounds of rushing waters filled his ears. The pilot called out and the rowers took their positions. They began to back off furiously, slowing the boat drastically. The eye first appeared as a line of jagged rocks, stretching out of the water, but soon revealed itself to be a tear in the fabric of the world. The waters of the river fell into the hole and disappeared into its black void. None who had ever entered its black depths had ever returned, and many considered it to be the edge of the world. As the ship glided by, Ricard turned his gaze to the other notable thing of interest in the chamber. It was a small port where 5 ships were currently docked, and behind them, the giant stone doors that led into the ancient fortress that was Moat Cailin. Their boat pulled into the docks and the men manning the structure quickly lashed the boat to the moorings, ensuring the boat wouldn't catch the current and drift into the Wolf's Eye. The gangplank was lowered and he descended from the boat and onto the dock. With Ned and Byrne following, and accompanied by 4 guards, they made their way through the stone doors, up the twisting corridors and before the doors of the Great Hall of Moat Cailin, where the majority of the lords of the north were assembled. Ricard turned to Ned and Bern. "Are you two ready?" he asked. Both nodded. Ricard pulled up the hood of his cloak, concealing his burnt features, and turned to the guards holding the door. "Open it." The doors swung open and Ricard Stark, the burnt lord, stepped forward into the hall. Immediately he was assaulted by a cacophony of shouting and yelling. With a straight back, his son on his right, and one of his most trusted advisors on his left, he began the long walk to the carven seat that acted as the seat of Moat Cailin. As the lords noticed his presence, the shouting and yelling dwindled away until it was non-existent. 100 pairs of eyes followed the burnt lord's progress from door to seat. Ricard reached the seat and paused. He turned around and stopped. Slowly he reached up and pulled back his hood, to reveal the horrible visage of the burnt lord, in all its terrible glory. He was greeted with utter silence, which he supposed was better than Lady Dane's reaction. "Lords of the North," he began, "look upon the face of your burned liege and know what we are fighting for." With that he sat down in the carven throne. Ned took the seat to his right and Bern, the seat to his left. "I call this meeting to order," he said with a wave of his hand, and yet the shouting match did not resume. The lords were still staring at him with horror etched into the lines of their faces. Porthian Redstock, the 12-year-old boy lord of Newport, a town on the stony shore, looked like he was about to throw up whatever he had for breakfast. Ricard sighed. Clearly an explanation was in order. "My lords, by now you will have no doubt noticed my new look. It was given to me by Aerys at the cost of my eldest son, a debt I fully intend to repay. Now can we get into the business of preparing for war?" Lord Roderick Riswell got to his feet. "Lord Stark, the rumors coming from the south are most interesting. They say your son, Skin, changed into a wolf and freed you. Is it true?" "Yes, Brandon Skin changed. How I do not know, but he did do it. He killed 37 guards, 102 gold cloaks and 2 sworn brothers of the Kingsguard, before escaping with me. They say they are still looking for him in Flea Bottom now." This declaration was met with silence, until finally a small Cranogman stirred. "My lord," he said as he stepped forward, "it is known that the Cranogmen are no strangers to the magic of the old gods, and many of our own are green seers and wargs, so I must ask, has the White Wolf risen?" Ricard scowled. This was perhaps going to be the biggest obstacle to war with Aerys. Ricard stood to his feet. "No," Ricard replied. This created the uproar that he had been absent earlier. "We can't go to war without the White Wolf." One lord cried, "The gods won't be with us." Ricard breathed in through his burnt nose and closed his eyes. This was standing in the way of his vengeance. "Enough!" he roared. The hall quieted immediately. We all know the story of what Brandon Snow did after Torrhen Stark bent the knee, so I won't bore you all with details you already know. We all know of Brandon's visions as he wrote them down in the Book of the Bastard, a book which House Stark has protected and kept hidden for 283 years now. The White Wolf was Brandon's promised savior of the North. He would give the Northmen what they so desperately wanted, their independence. Let me make something abundantly clear. This is now war for independence, this is a war of vengeance. Ricard paused. "I am fighting this for my son, my eldest son, who many of you knew and loved and who was killed by Aerys. The White Wolf will delver us from the south. I will deliver us from the dragon's jaws. Enough is enough, I say. 3 times we have been insulted by Targaryen kings. The first was Baelor the fucking Blessed, the second was Aegon the Oathbreaker, and now Aerys the Mad. I will not suffer under dragons any longer. I will throw Aerys from his ill-gotten throne and put someone on it who I actually respect and like." Ricard breathed in, struggling to keep a lid on his emotions. Next to him his son stood. "My lords," he called, "I am as wary of fighting in the south as any of you, but we cannot afford to not fight. Aerys has called for the heads of me, my younger brother and my father. My sister has been taken by Rhaegar and my elder brother has been killed by Aerys. If we do not march south, then the south will march on us. If there has ever been a time to march south, it is now. We have allies in Jon Arryn and Robert Baratheon. Tywin Lannister will not march against us, and hopefully Hoster Tully will march with us." "And what of the Tully girl?" Roderick Riswell called out. Ricard went to answer, but Ned stopped him with a glare. What of her? Ned asked the Lord. Will she be marrying you now that Brandon's dead? No, Ned replied. I have already been betrothed before the old gods. He held up his arm to reveal the weirwood bracelet, and Ricard saw that many a lord smiled happily, while just as many frowned in disappointment. And who is the girl you are betrothed to? Lord Riswell called. Oh, who cares? The great Yonumber called out, he's found a girl for himself. Congratulations, Ned. We've got a war to fight and some heads to smash. Thank you, Lord Umber, Ned said with a bow of his head and a gracious smile. However, to answer your question, Lord Riswell, I am betrothed to Lady Ashura of House Dane. So the North loses one southern lady only to gain another. Lord Riswell mocked. Ricard had enough of the presumptuous fool, always trying to weasel his daughter into the role of the next Lady of Winterfell. He got to his feet and stormed down to where Lord Riswell was seated. He grabbed him by the scruff of his collar and pulled him close. Listen here, he snarled into his ear, if you don't want part in this war, go home. Go home, and once I'm done I'll come back, tear your keep to the ground, hang you for an oath breaker, murder your sons and marry your daughters into the south. Got it? Lord Riswell swallowed audibly and nodded. So what's your choice? Ricard asked with a raised eyebrow. I'll march south. Lord Riswell whispered. Ricard Stark bared his teeth and smiled. Good. Behind him he heard the great Jon burst into laughter. Ha! He called, it seems this burnt lord still has bite left in him. Now can we plan for war? Ricard turned around and smiled at the large lord. At once. I have a blood debt to repay. Chapter 18, Ashura 2, The Pit of Vipers. Notes. All right, concerning Northern independence, what happened after Torrhen bent the knee? The old gods gave Brandon Snow a series of visions which he wrote down in a book the North calls the Book of the Bastard. In it, it supposedly speaks of the man who is promised to save the North, the White Wolf. Yes, the man is Jon Snow in this story. The North doesn't want to declare independence without him because they fear the old gods won't be with them. Ricard came up with a way of getting around this by still staying true to the Iron Throne, but not the dragons. This is why they have not declared independence yet, because they are waiting for their savior, the White Wolf. So there will be no independent North in this story, but it will come in the next part I've planned. Chapter text. Ashura Dane was sick of boats. She was sick of the endless expanse of blue ocean, sick of the way the boat rocked and the smell of salt. As such, she was almost glad when the stench of King's Landing filled her nostrils. Almost. If she had have listened to Ned, she would have returned to Starfall, but instead she had boarded a ship for King's Landing. She still remembered their departure and the mixed bag of emotions it had left within her. She heard a light knocking at her door and opened it to reveal her Ned standing there. Ned! She exclaimed with a smile as she enveloped him in a hug. Ashura! Ned greeted her as he returned her hug warmly. She hadn't seen Ned in hours, ever since he had wandered off with his father. She had been left standing on the pier like an idiot until Lord Marndale invited her to freshen up in his castle. He was a jovial and genial man, often acting the fool, but she sensed it was an act, a cover for a very intelligent and cunning man that lay beneath the many rolls of fat that surrounded him. He had escorted her to a room and then left her to her own devices. She had rested and bathed, but soon she was bored and staring at the walls. But now Ned was here. What did your father say? She asked, half dreading the answer. Ned smiled at her. He said I could marry you. Ashura's heart soared. What of Caitlin Tully? Ned laughed. My father said Hoster Tully will get out of his way or he'll show him that the burnt lord still has bite. When will we marry? She asked him. Once the war is done. He said with a grin. Her heart dropped in her chest. Once the war is done. His smile faltered. Yes. I'll come to Starfall myself and we can marry in the Godswood there. She frowned now. Why can't I marry you? No. Ned sighed at her. Ashura, you're going home. If we lose the war then no one will be any wiser and you can marry who you wish. But I want to marry you. I know. Ashura, remember when you promised me to stay by my side and you did? Yes. I promised to win the war, and then to come to Starfall and marry you. He had promised her and she would hold him to his promise. even if she would not hold herself to the promises she had made him. She had promised to go home to Starfall and wait out the war, but Elia needed her. She descended from the boat that had carried her to King's Landing and begun the trek up the shit-stained streets to the Red Keep. Elia had been on Dragonstone until recently when she had been recalled to court by Aerys. She entered through the Red Gates, that only recently had seen the death of the Northern Lords that had accompanied Ricard and Brandon Stark respectively. Soon she entered Elia's chambers within the Maiden Vault. Elia was sitting there, nursing Aegon with one arm and playing with Rhaenys with the other. "Hello Elia," she said casually as she strolled over to the wine. "Ashera," Elia hissed. "What are you doing here?" "I've come to serve you, my lady. I am your handmaiden." "But what about your suitor?" she asked. "He has promised to marry me still." "Really? And he let you come back here?" "Not exactly. I mean he did promise to marry me, but he told me to go home to Starfall. I agreed and instead came here." "What for?" "It's war, Ashera. You'd be safer in Starfall." "I know. My princess needed me though." Elia sighed. "He must really love you if he let you go. I thought you were going to be used as a hostage. From what I understand that is what his father wanted to do, but he refused." "So it's true then?" "What's true?" "His father lives." "Lives?" "Yes, I guess you could say that. He seems to be consumed by thoughts of vengeance though." Ashera turned to Elia then. "Elia, tell me true, on the day Ricard Stark was burned did you laugh at him?" Elia looked horrified. "No," she exclaimed. "The only one who was laughing was the king. Everyone else was dead silent. I think poor Sir Jaime even wet his breeches." Ashera sighed. "He has sworn to kill you and your children." Elia's pretty face twisted into a snarl. "And what? Put his daughter in my place? Make his daughter Rhaegar's wife?" Ashera shook her head. "I don't think so. When I left all he was talking about was repaying his blood debt." "His blood debt?" "Yes. He seems to think he owes Aerys something." Elia smirked then. "Oh, but he does." "He does? What could he possibly owe him?" "Why, what Aerys took from him. His eldest son. He owes him the life of his eldest son." "That means he plans to kill Rhaegar," Elia finished with a triumphant grin. "And then Aegon shall be king." Ashera had been serving Elia for a month now and reports had arrived that the Northern Vanguard had entered the Riverlands and was marching to meet Jon Arryn at the Crossroads Inn, while in the Stormlands, Robert had been mustering his banners and crushing dissenting lords. On the particular morning that they received the news of his march from Storm's End, Ashera had been sitting with Elia when she had suddenly felt the urge to throw up. She had rushed to the chamber pot and disgorged that morning's breakfast. Elia had watched her strangely before dismissing everyone else from the room. "Ashera," she asked once everyone had left the room, "when was the last time you bled?" Ashera's heart dropped as she considered the response. Her silence told Elia all she needed to know apparently. "Just as I thought," Elia said. "Is he the father?" Ashera felt tears spring to eyes. She was going to have a child. She was going to have Ned's child. He had better marry her now. She nodded at Elia. "He is the father," she whispered. Chapter 19, Eddard 6, Marching South. Summary. Please comment and tell me what you think. Chapter text. Ned Stark watched as his troops, the Northern Vanguard, marched down the causeway of the Neck and into the Riverlands. The Vanguard, numbering 20,000 men, was made up of 12,000 light cavalry, who constantly guarded the moat, 5,000 of the Winter Wolves and the 3,000 soldiers of Mount Starpoint, the beating heart of the Northern Army. The 3,000 soldiers of Mount Starpoint, called the Weirwood Warriors, were the most elite soldiers in all of the North, if not Westeros. They were men chosen by the Green Men at a young age. They were taken at 5 and spent their entire lives dedicated to becoming the greatest fighters the North could field. All of them were accomplished with the bow, lance and sword, as well as being skilled wargs. Indeed, part of the training was spent in the Wolf's Wood, where boys of 10 would be left and told not to return until they had warged with a wolf. The most impressive of all of the Winter Wolves however was their Lord Commander, a man by the name of Roderick Walton. He was an incredibly tall and incredibly gaunt man. He had black hair, and steely grey eyes that seemed to stare right through a man. He wore steel armor, inlaid with bronze, and a weirwood mask, that had weirwood sap dripping out of its eyes, giving the appearance of a crying face. In many ways the mask reminded Ned of the Heart Tree in Winterfell. He had a weirwood bow, slung over his back along with a quiver of arrows, and resting at his side was the Sword of Starpoint. The Sword of Starpoint was a blade that was held by the Lord Commander of the Winter Wolves, and it was made of the same metal as Arthur Dayne's great sword, Dawn, that being star steel. The blade's name was Harbinger, and it had a past that was as storied as ice. It was first forged and wielded by the first Lord Commander of the Weirwood Warriors, Brandon Snow, a man whose moniker was Bloody Brandon the Blessed. From then it had been passed from Lord Commander to Lord Commander until it rested by Roderick's side today. Roderick Walton had watched with 2 wolves, an eagle, and he rode a tremendous white hart. He rode beside Ned now, his white hart dutifully plodding along, and his eyes constantly scanning the tree line. The man was a true warrior, and one that Ned rightfully feared. The soldiers of Starpoint, though untested in real battle, were without a doubt fearsome and fearless fighters, rivaling even the unsullied soldiers of Astapor in their unwavering devotion to their duty. As Ned watched, a giant golden eagle soared down from the clouds and alighted on Roderick Walton's shoulder. The road is clear as far south as the crossroads inn. Jon Arryn has assembled his forces there, Roderick said, as he scratched the eagle under the chin. Ned nodded. How many more days of marching do you reckon we've got ahead of us? Ned asked the grizzled man. Roderick shrugged. I don't know. I haven't traveled these lands before, but from what I could see I'll say maybe 2.5 weeks. Ned nodded. Are there any troop movements away from the King's Road? Aye. Many of the minor lords are summoning their troops. I saw troops at Castle Deary, the Twins, Seaguard and Fairmarket. Ned sighed. It seemed Hoster Tully was set on his daughter becoming the next Lady of Winterfell and was refusing to move until he was assured of such a fact. My lord, Roderick said. Do you have a plan for what happens if Hoster Tully declares for the Targaryens? No, Ned sighed. I don't want to fight the man, but I can't marry his daughter now that I have been betrothed to another. If he values the lives of his family, hopefully he will stand by you. Ned glanced at the old soldier out of the corner of his eye. He was scowling yet still watching the tree line. I don't want children or women murdered for this war, Roderick. It's dishonorable. Roderick Walton turned to him, his face one of query. Tell me, Lord Stark, what is the greater dishonor? To kill a man to save a battle, or to fight the battle to save the man? What? Ned said, confused. Honor is all well and true in summer, Lord Stark, but we are in winter now and we have no place for honor beyond what the old gods demand of us. Ned frowned. Well then, why didn't you just kill me to save this battle? I swore an oath to the Stark in Winterfell. I swore no oath to the Targaryen in King's Landing. I served your grandfather and father dutifully, Lord Stark. When the time comes I shall serve you too. So what of Elia Martell and her children? Do you think my father is justified in calling for their heads? There is no greater dishonor than needless killing, Lord Stark. Your father is still getting over the death of his eldest son. I do not think he will order their deaths when the time comes. As much as your father wants to forget the man he was, you cannot shed your nature like you can clothes. Your father was an honorable man, though perhaps not as God-fearing as I or others would have liked. When the time comes he will do the honorable thing. Tell me, Roderick, do you think we will win this war without the White Wolf? Roderick shifted on the back of the White Hart. I never wanted to be here without the White Wolf by my side, but your father forced all of our hands. However, I can understand your father's reasoning. To go to war with the dragons is not to declare independence. That will be our only saving grace if the gods are truly watching. The two men fell into silence after that, Ned contemplating Roderick's words and watching the countryside slip by. In the distance he saw a weirwood growing in the forest. They say you have a man who has the green sight. Is it true? Ned asked. It is. Roderick replied. Has he seen anything? I don't know. I prefer not to know. Why? Surely knowledge can help us win. Not all knowledge. If I knew what my Greenseer knew, I could become comfortable in the superiority of my own knowledge and make a mistake that dooms us all. Let's say for example that my Greenseer tells me there will be a battle tomorrow and I will win. As such, I go to sleep confident in my ability to win and don't plan properly. As such I lose. Do you understand why some knowledge is dangerous now? Ned nodded. In the distance the sun was beginning to set. He stopped his horse and turned to the host following him. We'll set up camp here for the night. He told the men following him and they turned to relay it to the rest of his forces. In the morn, we double-time the march until we reach the crossroads. The sun was shining high in the sky when they finally reached the crossroads inn. John Arryn was there with Bronze Yohn Royce to greet him and Roderick as they entered the encampment. Ned. John called as he walked across and embraced him in a hug. How was your trip through the mountains of the moon? Rough. Ned replied. I got stabbed by a clansman. John smiled. They are getting bold. When this war is done I might ride into the mountains and remind them of why we hold the Vale. Now who's this old soul with you? Ned turned to Roderick who had dismounted his white hart and was watching them with his steely grey eyes. John meet Roderick Walton, Lord Commander of the Weirwood Warriors. Roderick meet John Arryn, Lord of the Eyrie and Protector of the Vale. Lord Arryn. Roderick said as he inclined his head. It's a pleasure to meet you. John replied. With that he turned back to Ned. I've already made the arrangements of our trip to meet with Host Tully. I'll have an escort of 50 men, I suggest you take the same. I don't think we will, but it's possible we might need to fight our way out of it if you insist on marrying Lady Dane. Roderick stepped forward and placed a hand on the pommel of his sword. It is not a choice, Lord Arryn, he spat, it has been ordained by the gods. To refuse to marry her now would be to bring ruin and shame upon his house. John Arryn smiled. But of course. I assure you I meant no offense, Lord Roderick. I was only stating the reality of our situation. Roderick harumphed and stepped back yet refused to take his hand off his sword. It's all right, Roderick, Ned said, John is just ignorant of our customs. He meant no offense. Can you gather 50 of the winter wolves, and prepare them for an immediate departure? Immediate. John said. Are you sure you don't want to rest first? I'll rest once the war is done, Ned said as he remounted his horse. Roderick, you're in charge here until I return. Chapter 20, Ricard 4, Marching South 2. Summary. A very short chapter explaining what the Burnt Lord is doing. Very short chapter. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Ricard Stark swelled with a savage sense of pride as he watched the Northern Army march into the depths of Moat Cailin. They were marching into the vast underground cave system that crisscrossed the entire continent. The idea to use it as a means of transportation was first thought up of by Cregan Stark, the Old Man of the North. He had gotten the idea from the stories of the Brother Kings beyond the wall, Jendel and Gorn, who used an underground system of caves to totally bypass the defenses of the wall. He had spent much of his tenure as Lord of Winterfell mapping out the underground caves using wargs. Many a warg had been driven mad losing their animals in the intricate cave system, but at the end of it the North had access to pretty much the entirety of Westeros. The mapped tunnels stretched as far south as the Kingswood and deep into the western hills. The Vale of Arryn had no mapped tunnels, however, as the rocky and mountainous terrain made it treacherous for the tunnels. He was leading the main force of the Northern Army, a force that was 50,000 strong. He had left 40,000 troops back in the north, sent the vanguard, 20,000 strong to the crossroads inn and sent the other 30,000 men south with Bern Seastook. If all went to plan, Rhaegar would find himself trapped between three armies. It would be a glorious slaughter, one for the ages to remember. Then, once Rhaegar was in his clutches, he would finally repay his debt to Aerys, and leave him a permanent reminder of exactly who he had provoked. For what was a 300-year-old dragon to a direwolf of 8,000 years? A direwolf that has outlasted the greatest empires of Essos and outlasted the famed dragons of the Dragon Lords of Valyria. A reckoning was coming for those that had dared to insult him, and the insult had been most grave and cost him his eldest son. Next to him his greatest lords and generals moved into formation beside him. Together they spurred their horses forward and descended into the underground, ready for conflict with any who stood in the Burnt Lord's way. Notes. Any ideas to where Ricard is heading with his 60,000 men? Chapter 21, Ashura 3, Starfall. Summary. This chapter is set a few weeks after the other ones. Please leave a comment and tell me what you think. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. The sand squished under Ashura's feet as she walked from the dock to the gates of Starfall. Her heart was heavy with the knowledge of Elia's dismissal. After Elia had found out she was pregnant with Ned's baby, she had dismissed her immediately, ordering her to return to Starfall. She had protested heavily, but Elia hadn't budged an inch, even going to assert her authority as a princess of the realm to reinforce her position. Ashura had left, but her anger at Elia was still burning fiercely. Elia was one of her dearest friends and she was totally oblivious to the threats that had surrounded her. She was convinced that at the end of the madness she would be able to put Aegon on the throne. She was convinced that she could treat with the Burnt Lord. At no point had she considered that the Burnt Lord was unlike any other enemy House Targaryen had faced before. He had no interest in their throne, he only had interest in paying back the debts he felt he owed House Targaryen, and if what Ned said was true he had the power to do it too. She reached the great gates of Starfall and they were opened by a Dane guardsman. "Lady Ashura," he said, "what are you doing here?" Ashura smiled at the guard. "May I enter?" The guard, suitably chastised, moved out of her way and allowed her to enter. "Is my family here?" she asked as she walked by. "Your eldest brother and father were called to night song, along with most of the other Dornish bannermen. Your sister is here and your other brother rode in only this morning." Ashura frowned. "My other brother? You mean Arthur?" "Yes, my lady. He rode in alone this morning. He's resting at the moment." "Take me to him. He said he wasn't to be disturbed." Ashura turned around and glared at the man. "I'll think he'll be disturbed for me. Now take me to him." The man nodded quickly and walked away in the direction of the Palestone Tower, where Arthur's old chambers were. She followed in his wake, and was soon standing outside Arthur's old chambers. The man nodded at the door. "He's in there." Ashura nodded. "Thank you." The man seemed to take it as a dismissal and rushed down the corridor. It seemed Arthur's reputation preceded him in everything he did. She tried the handle and found it had been locked. She knocked loudly. Something hit the door. "I said I wasn't to be disturbed," a muffled voice called out. It sounded grumpy. "Arthur," she called. "You better open this door right now or I'll have the guards smash it down." "Ashura," the muffled voice exclaimed, and then there was a lot of movement behind the door. After a few moments the door swung open to reveal her brother. His hair was disheveled. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "Aren't you meant to be with Elia?" Ashura laughed. "So you do remember Elia Targaryen?" She stressed Elia's last name, hoping to get a reaction from him, and he didn't disappoint. "What are you saying?" he snarled as his features twisted in a snarl. She smiled at him sweetly, the picture of innocence. "Your snarl might scare soldiers, Arthur, but it doesn't scare me." This only made Arthur's scowl deepen. "You still haven't answered my question." "Elia dismissed me," she replied simply. "Now what are you doing here? Aren't you meant to be with your prince?" She scoffed. "Dismissed you? What did she dismiss you for?" "I've answered your question, now it's time for you to answer one of mine." Arthur shuffled his feet and stared at the floor. His hand drifted to his hair and he began to run his hands through his hair, a habit he had picked up from a young age. Ashura knew, a habit he displayed when he was nervous. "Arthur," she prompted him. He took a deep breath and licked his lips. "I've come to get a midwife." "A midwife? What would Arthur need a midwife for?" "Oh." Then it hit her, and it her like a punch to the stomach. She struggled to breathe as she realized the full implications of what Arthur had said. Anger settled in her stomach. She clenched her jaw. Rhaegar had gotten the girl pregnant. Rhaegar had gotten Ned's sister pregnant. She looked at Arthur, who was looking at her sheepishly, and suddenly she just wanted to hit him. So hit him she did. It was a hard hit too, and it left him sprawled on the floor, his cheek glowing red. "I guess I deserved that," he whispered. "Deserved that?" She screamed as she kicked him. You loved Elia Martell once. Once upon a time you were going to marry her. Now you've stood by as she was publicly spurned, and now you're helping a madman destroy what is left of their marriage. She looked upon his white cloak with disgust. She reached down and tried yanking it off his shoulders. Take it off. Take it off. She screeched, you're not worthy to wear it. Ashura. Arthur yelled as he struggled to get off the floor while she pummeled him with slaps, kicks and punches. Stop it. He scrambled backwards and into the room, away from the furious Ashura, who picked up a blood orange and hurled it at him. It hit his white cape with a splat, and stained it with the fruit's juices. It looked chillingly like blood. She stopped and looked at him with disgust. That's better. Show the world the blood that rests on your shoulders. Did you know the realm is now at war? Arthur nodded and looked all the world like a sulking child. It's not my fault. Not your fault, she scoffed. Tell me, Sir Arthur, did you try and stop him? He is my prince. Arthur said aghast. I do as he commands. And if he commanded you to kill a child? Arthur paused. He went to get his feet, but a flying vase convinced him to stay on the floor. He glared at her. It's my turn to ask a question. I think I get to, actually. She nodded. Why did Elia dismiss you? She smiled at him. He smiled back. I'm pregnant. She replied. The smile fell from his face so fast she burst out laughing. What? He cried. Ashura, how could you have been so foolish? Who is the father? She rolled her eyes at him and lifted her arm to show him her bracelet. Who do you think? He glared at her. I'm going to kill him. He snarled. Is it too late for Moon Tea? Moon Tea? She exclaimed. What is wrong with you? This is mine and Ned's child. Why would I kill it? It's the next heir of Winterfell. Arthur frowned at her, and then something changed in his eyes. He promised to marry you, didn't he? She smiled at him and nodded. He looked at her with pity. Ashura, I'm sorry, but Ned, they say he, Arthur swallowed and couldn't meet her gaze. He what? She demanded. Oh gods, she thought, please don't let him have died. Don't tell me he died, she begged. Arthur got to his feet and wandered over. He embraced her in a hug. Arthur? She asked, what happened? A raven arrived a few days ago. I was given it as I entered Starfall this morning. It said that the Riverlords declared for the Starks. But Hoster Tully sent Ned a letter saying he wouldn't call his banners unless Ned married his daughter. Ashura replied. Exactly. Arthur said as looked down at her with pity. If the news that Lyanna was pregnant had hit her like a punch, this news hit her like a ton of bricks. Notes. Next chapter, Ned. Chapter 22, Eddard 7, Riverrun Rendezvous. Summary. Ned meets the Tullys at Riverrun. Chapter text. Riverrun made for an imposing, yet majestic sight as it appeared on the horizon. While it may not have had the tallest towers, or thickest walls, it was a sturdy and easily defensible position, augmented by the two rivers running beside each side of the castle. The leaping trout of House Tully flew from the battlements, and guards dressed in the blue and red livery marched the walkways. Ned and Jon Arryn ride through the gates, their escort of 100 men following in their wake. As they rode into the courtyard, they saw the entire household had been assembled. First in line was a tall, broad, strong man with blue eyes, red hair and a heavy beard that could only have been the Lord of Riverrun, Hoster Tully. Next to him was his eldest daughter, Brandon's betrothed, Catelyn. She was a strikingly beautiful woman, but to Ned, Ashura was still more beautiful. Next to her as her younger sister, Lysa, and then a young boy of 10 years who could only be Hoster's youngest son, Ed Muir. Ned pulled his horse to a stop in front of Lord Hoster and dismounted. With Jon Arryn by his side they stepped forward to greet him. Lord Stark, Lord Arryn. Lord Tully said as he extended a hand. Ned seized the man's grip and shook his hand. Do you have bread and salt, my lord? Ned asked. Hoster smiled at him. Of course, he said as he dipped his head. He gestured to a nearby servant and she stepped forward holding a plate of bread and bowl of salt. Ned took the bread, sprinkled it with salt and ate it. Inwardly he sighed in relief. Now his safety was assured under the eyes of gods. My family, Lord Tully was saying as he introduced them. My eldest Lady Caitlin. She has been raised in the light of the seven, and you will find no daughter more dutiful. She has the makings of a very wonderful lady. Lady Caitlin stepped forward and curtsied before extending a hand for Ned to kiss. He placed a gentle kiss upon it, before switching his gaze to the next in line. My second daughter, Lysa. The girl glared at him with such hatred in her eyes it was slightly disconcerting. He nodded at her with a smile, but she just lifted her nose and turned away. He glanced at Lord Tully, who looked absolutely furious. He smiled at Ned tightly before gesturing to his youngest. My son, Ed Muir. Ned knelt down to the boy's level and ruffled his hair. The boy smiled shyly at him and shook his hand. You have beautiful children, Lord Tully. You must be proud. John was saying as he greeted Muir. I am. I'll have my men escort you to your chambers. We'll meet in my solar after dinner and discuss the state of the realm. Ned nodded and followed the soldiers who guided him to his rooms. There he found a steaming tub of water waiting and he bathed, washing the grime of the road from his hair and skin. He put on a new doublet embroidered with the running grey direwolf, before laying down to rest before the evening meal. When he ascended to the great hall a few hours later, the feast was about to begin. He was seated next to Lady Caitlin, while John was seated next to Lord Hoster. Lady Caitlin. He greeted as he took a seat. Lord Stark. She replied with a dip of her head. They sat in an awkward silence for a few minutes, before Lady Caitlin spoke again. I offer my condolences for the death of your brother and father. They were great men, both of them. My father isn't dead, Lady Caitlin. Lady Caitlin frowned. I heard he was burnt alive by Ace. He was. He escaped and returned home. Lady Caitlin smiled tightly. I'm glad to hear it. No doubt. Ned replied dryly, aware that her dreams of becoming Lady of Winterfell as soon as she married him had just been shattered. The doors opened and servants walked in bearing the first course. It was some sort of creamy fish stew, which was a bit too rich for Ned's liking. So Lord Stark, Lord Tully called as he ate, I believe I didn't have the chance to offer my condolences for the loss of your family earlier. On behalf of House Tully, and indeed all the Riverlands, let me offer our condolences. With this he stood to his feet and raised his mug of ale. To Rickard and Brandon Stark, men who were slain unjustly before their time. Ned frowned. My lord, he called out, where did you get the news that my father was dead? It was Lord Hoster's turn to frown now. Is he not dead? Did you not receive his letter? Lord Hoster smiled. Come now, Lord Stark, it was a cunning ploy pretending your father was alive, but we all know that the burnt letter came from you or your allies. Ned shook his head. No. My father still lives. I met him at White Harbor after fleeing the Vale. What, you have seen him with your own eyes? Yes. I've hugged him with my own arms too. What about your brother? A voice called out and Ned turned to see little Lysa Tully glaring at him. Brandon? Ned asked. Brandon is dead. The Tully girl smiled sweetly then. Good. She said before getting up and storming out of the hall. My lord, I am so sorry, she has been most rebellious ever since I sent my ward home. In his head a memory of Brandon boasting sprung up. Something about a boy who challenged him for the hand of Caitlin Tully. What was his name? Little Thumb. Small Finger. Little Finger. Ed Muir called out. He was Lysa's friend. He was my friend too, but got upset at me for squiring for your brother. Ned smiled tightly. He hadn't even been here a day and already the Tullys were grating on his nerves. John must have sensed his discomfort because he changed the subject. Have you squired for anyone else? John asked Ed Muir. The boy smiled and began to talk of his squiring for different knights and Ned ate the rest of his dinner in silence. Eventually the feast waned to an end and Ned and John followed Hoster to his solar. It had a window that overlooked the Red Fork, and the sound of rushing waters filled the air. Hoster took a seat behind his carved mahogany desk and gestured for the two of them to sit across from him. Ned took a seat and reached for the goblet of wine that had been placed in front of him. Hopefully he wouldn't need too much of this tonight. Chapter 23, Eddard 8, Hostile Hoster. Summary. Ned and Hoster have a talk. Chapter text. So Hoster Tully said as he sipped his wine, "Are you happy with the wedding occurring tomorrow? As it's war, it'll be best to affirm this alliance as quickly as possible." Ned winced. It seemed Hoster believed the marriage still stood. This was not good. "Actually, Lord Tully, a marriage will not be happening." Lord Hoster frowned. "You want it after the war?" He shook his head. "That will not do. If you die in battle, then my daughter won't be Lady of Winterfell." Ned knew the marriage wasn't for love, but the callousness of what the man had just said chilled Ned to the bone. Thankfully Jon Arryn interceded on Ned's behalf. "I think what Ned meant to say, Lord Hoster," he said, "is that he will not marry your daughter." Hoster scowled deeply and got to his feet. "Now listen here, you upstart wolf pup. Me and your father had a deal. I've honored my end of the deal, you honor yours. You'll marry my daughter and that's the end of it. She has been raised from birth to be the Lady of Winterfell and you will find no better match in all the 7 kingdoms. Plus, her dowry includes a respectable number of troops and the support of the Lord Paramount of the Riverlands, something I thought you were in need of with your father and brother's deaths." Ned scowled back at him. "For the last time, my father is not dead. And didn't you tell me in the courtyard that your daughter was raised in the light of the 7? "Yes." Hoster spat. "So what?" "Well then clearly she wasn't raised to be Lady of Winterfell," Ned replied. Hoster's face turned as red as his hair and he looked ready to burst. "Come now, Hoster. Take a seat, let's all calm down. This conversation is not going well. Ned, explain why you can't marry Catelyn," Jon said in a soothing tone. Hoster glared at Ned with Jon's words. "And why can't you marry my daughter? We all know you're not betrothed." Ned shook his head. "I am betrothed, Lord Tully." He raised his arm to reveal the pale white bracelet encircling his wrist. "I am betrothed before my gods." Lord Hoster looked upon him in disgust. "I don't care about your gods, boy. It's a simple equation. Marry my daughter or I fight for Aerys." "Now Lord Hoster, don't be hasty," Jon was saying, trying to calm both men down. Hoster glanced at Jon and suddenly nodded. "You're right. I was too hasty. But boy, you will marry my daughter." Ned went to protest but Hoster held up a hand, demanding silence. "I assume you know of your brother's reputation?" Hoster asked. Ned glared at him. "My dead brother's reputation? Be very careful with your next words, Lord Tully, if you value your life." Hoster waved his hand dismissively. "I don't mean it as an insult, boy, but rather an assessment of reality." "Yes. I know of my brother's reputation," Ned replied through gritted teeth. "Well, while he was here, before the gallant fool managed to run off and get himself killed, he managed to impregnate my daughter, but not before marrying her." Ned frowned. "But that means that your daughter is already the Lady of Winterfell." Hoster nodded. "There is only one problem. All of Brandon's witnesses were killed at King's Landing." Ned nodded, understanding now. His heart was sinking in his chest. "It's simple, Ned. Marry the girl, and become Lord of Winterfell. Brandon's son will become the Lord after you." Ned frowned. Something did not add up here. "Did Brandon marry before a gods would?" Ned asked. "Yes." Ned smiled at Lord Tully. He picked up his wine glass and began to swirl the dark red liquid inside around. "Tell me, Lord Tully, did you know that Brandon loved a woman back in the north?" Lord Hoster shrugged. "I don't really care." "Well, on the day he was told he was to marry your daughter, he ran away to marry his love. My father ran after him, of course, and brought him back, but that night as we ate, he made clear his terms for marrying your daughter. His first, and most important term, was that he would marry her in the light of the 7. Hoster frowned at him. "He changed his mind." Ned smiled and out the glass back down. "Do you know why he wanted to marry your daughter in the light of the 7? "No. It was because once my father had deposed Aerys and broken from the south, he intended to marry his love before a gods would. No doubt blood, Ned knocked the wine glass over and it spilled over the desk. Would have been spilled, but it would not have mattered in the end. Your daughter would still be left without a home and most likely with a child Brandon didn't want. What are you saying? Lord Tully snarled. Why, you lying, of course. Brandon never married your daughter. Did he sleep with her? Yes. Did he marry her? No. So fix the stain your brother left on my daughter's honor. And destroy my own honor in the process. Ned scoffed. Why would I do that? To break a betrothal before the gods is to bring ruin and shame upon my house. The men sat in silence for a while contemplating what had just been said. Hoster Tully glared at Ned. Screw your gods and screw your honor. Hoster Tully suddenly yelled. Guards! Immediately the door burst open and 4 guards rushed in. Seize these men and throw them in the dungeons. Hoster snarled as he pointed at John and Ned. Later that night, as John and Ned sat in the cells beneath Riverrun, Ned turned to John. John, he asked. Did I do the right thing? John sighed. If you just married the girl it would be so much easier. I know. But a woman has been dishonored. I can't just let her go. No one expects you to. They sat in silence for a minute. Ned laughed suddenly. Even in death Brandon is getting me in trouble. Ned mused. Life is strange. John nodded. What are you going to do? I don't know. Well, tomorrow Lord Tully wants an answer. He sends a raven tomorrow night, he said. Ned sighed. Why did the gods have to instill a sense of duty within him? Why couldn't he be more like Brandon? He sighed, knowing what he must do now. Guard! He called. After a moment a guard appeared at the narrow slit that served as a window. What? He spat out. Call Lord Tully. Tell him I have made my decision. Chapter 24, Eddard 9, Nothing's gonna stop me now. Summary. We finally find out Ned's decision. But does it leave us with more questions than answers? Chapter text. The cell door opened and Brandon Tully walked in holding a flask of wine. He looked at Ned, who was curled into the corner, still hurting from where Hoster had hit him. The swelling covered half of his face and throbbed painfully. He hadn't been amused when Ned had told him he was not going to marry his daughter a second time, accusing him of wasting his time. That had been an hour ago. Hello? John said as he struggled to his feet. What brings you here? John's presence was perhaps Ned's greatest regret. He had never meant for John to get caught up and hurt in his father's games, but his father had insisted on his presence. He had said something about learning of the burnt lord's bite second hand. Brandon Tully turned to Ned and sat down across from him. You really love her, don't you? He asked. There was no need to ask who he was talking about. He closed his eyes and saw her face in his mind's eye. Raven black hair, a heart-shaped face and hauntingly beautiful purple eyes that danced with laughter. Ned replied as he looked at the man they called the Blackfish. It's because I love her that I refuse to marry another. Brandon nodded and Ned thought he saw a spark of bitterness in the man's eyes. He took a swig from the wine flask before offering it to Ned. Ned took it gratefully and swallowed a large gulp before passing it to John. Were you ever told how I got the name Blackfish? Ned shook his head. Brandon grinned as he took the wine from John. My brother wanted me to marry a red wine girl. I refused and wouldn't marry her, so in a moment of rage he labeled me as the black goat of the Tully flock. I laughed and told him I was a Tully and that I was a blackfish, not a black goat. He very kindly suggested to me to use it as my sigil, so I did. Ever since I have been known as the Blackfish. Ned looked at Brandon skeptically. Does your story have a point? He asked. It does actually. You see, once I was in the exact same position as you. Lord Tully was trying to force me into a marriage that I didn't want to be in. You told him no and refused to marry the girl he wanted you to. That doesn't exactly help your argument here. But it does. Brandon replied. You see, he sighed, my brother has always been an ambitious man. Ambitious, but he is also honorable and good. Honorable and good. Ned scoffed. He broke guest right. Brandon winced. He conceded. But beneath that ambition he is good. I promise to do all I can to convince him to side with you. Even if I have to sneak you out of here myself, I promise to do all I can to let you marry the girl you love. Ned looked at Brindon mournfully. I'm sorry Sir Brindon, but it's too late. He sighed. Too late? Brindon asked, what do you mean? Ned sighed again. It doesn't matter now. There is nothing you or I can do to stop what is to come. Brindon looked at him in confusion. Stop. Stop what? The sounds of a scuffle outside the door filled the cell and everyone's eyes snapped to the door. It opened to reveal a grinning giant and a liege lord. Stop us, of course. Great Jon Umber called out as he and Roose Bolton stepped into the cell, his giant iron greatsword glittering in the dull light. Chapter 25, Hoster I, The Burnt Lord's Bite. Summary. The Burnt Lord is here. Seriously though, this has most probably been my favorite chapter to write so far. Leave a comment and tell me what you think. Notes. I posted a chapter earlier today, so make sure to read that before you read this. Chapter text. Hoster Tully opened his eyes to hear shouting and yelling going on in the courtyard. He sat up hurriedly and turned throw on his boots when he first noticed the figure in the corner. His face was shrouded in shadows, but he could see his gauntlet-covered hands, hands which held a Valyrian steel greatsword. The figure said, "You're awake." "Who are you?" Hoster said as he scrambled back in his bed. The man shrugged. "Only a dead man." He stirred and pulled a whetstone from his lap. He began to run it down his Valyrian steel sword. The yells of the men outside were drowned out by the scrape of the stone against the steel edge. "We've never met, but we have talked extensively on a variety of matters." "We have?" Hoster asked dubiously. "Yes," the man replied. "What's your name?" Hoster asked as he glanced at the bedside table where he kept a dagger stashed. "The dagger's gone," the man said as he noticed Hoster's gaze. "As is the sword in your closet, the crossbow in the chest at the end of your bed, the ceremonial axes hanging on the wall, and the guards outside your door are currently incapacitated. Don't try anything, Lord Tully, or you will find it will not go down well." Hoster swallowed thickly. This man was good. If he couldn't fight his way out, then he would have to talk his way out. Hopefully he could stall long enough for his other guards to get here wherever they were. "What do you want?" he asked suspiciously. He saw the man's shrouded figure shrug. "Just vengeance." "Vengeance?" Hoster asked. "Vengeance for whom?" "Vengeance for the fallen. Vengeance for the slain. Vengeance for the burnt." The man's voice dropped an octave. "Vengeance for my son." Suddenly Hoster knew who this was. "No," Hoster murmured as he glanced at the man in shock. The man removed a hand from the sword and threw forward a scrap of paper. It floated through the air to land in front of him. He picked it up and recognized it as the letter that Lord Ricard had supposedly sent out after his burning. The one the nobles called the burnt letter. "I sent a letter, Lord Tully. I warned you all, there shall be no mercy for those that get in my way." The man stood up and stepped into the light to reveal a horribly burnt face. "When I first saw my son and his betrothed, I promised him that if you stood in the way of his marriage, I would show you that this burnt lord still has bite. You've stood in the way of a marriage before the old gods and broken guest right. If you lived in the north, I would have your head." It took a moment for the burnt lord's words to sink in. "So you won't kill me?" Hoster asked, his heart in his mouth. The burnt lord didn't respond. He merely wandered over to the window that looked down upon Riverrun's courtyard. "Why would I do that?" the burnt lord said with a querying look. "You can still help me." "What makes you think I would ever help you? Especially after this?" "Come here," he said as he gestured with one gauntlet-clad hand. Hoster stood and wandered over to the window. He looked down into the courtyard, and what he saw made his heart catch in his mouth. His beautiful children were standing there, surrounded by soldiers flying the banners of House Stark. Catelyn stood proud, unflinching even in the face of death. She cradled a crying Edmure in one arm, and a sobbing Lysa in the other. "Here is what is going to happen, Lord Tully," the burnt lord said as he hefted his sword onto his shoulder. "You're going to call your banners. You're going to convince them to fight for the rebels. You'll march your troops beside ours in any battle and you'll help me throw heirs from the throne. Why would I do that? The burnt lord smiled and it chilled Lord Tully to the bone. First I will kill the second girl. What's her name? Lysa. Then the boy, then your brother and then finally once your other daughter has given birth to Brandon's bastard, I will kill her. I will take Brandon's son and raise him as a Stark through and through. Then I will legitimize him, give him a new name, maybe Mud, and raise him to Lord of Riverrun. Hoster's mind went into overdrive as he thought through this set of actions. He didn't believe him. Above all, Starks were known to be honorable, indeed his gallant fool of a son had rushed to his death to defend his sister's honor. No, the burnt lord was bluffing. You're bluffing, Hoster said as he turned away from the window. The burnt lord shrugged as though he didn't care either way. He grabbed him by the arms and began to drag him out of the room. The burnt lord dragged him into the corridors and down into the Riverrun's courtyard. His children saw him immediately, as well as the grim spectre that strode beside him. Lysa shrieked upon seeing him and burst into a fresh round of sobs. Father! She shrieked. Hold him! The burnt lord snarled at two of his soldiers as he shoved Hoster into their arms. He strode over to Hoster's children and snatched the sobbing Lysa from Caitlyn's arms. Bring me a block! He roared and the soldiers rushed to do his bidding. Lysa began to struggle and scream as she realized what the burnt lord was about to do. The soldiers pulled a block from somewhere, a great, hulking, black piece of ironwood, though where from Hoster had no clue. He began to struggle in the soldier's grasp. Stop! He called. You're scaring her. The burnt lord frowned at him as the block was placed in front of him. Scaring her, he snarled, I'm killing her. He shoved Lysa's head down onto the block and ordered his soldiers to hold it there. In the background a door slammed but the burnt lord didn't even flinch. Stop! Stop! Hoster cried, I'll call my banners. I'll work with you. Stop! Do you have any last words you wish for us to convey? The burnt lord asked Lysa as she struggled on the block. Lysa screamed wordlessly in response. In the name of the old gods, the first and last of all the gods of the first men and the ones who have been and shall always be, I, Ricard of House Stark, sentence you to die. With that he hefted his great Valyrian steel sword and swung it down. Hoster watched in horror as the sword swung over his daughter's head right in front of him. Then, just before it could separate Lysa's head from her body, a dark blue smashed into the burnt lord and sent him and his sword flying away. Hoster watched in amazement as Eddard Stark untangled himself from his father's limbs and struggled to his feet, panting heavily. What were you thinking? He screamed at the burnt lord. The burnt lord pulled himself off the floor before wandering over and picking up his sword. He threw a dark glare at his son before storming off into the bowels of the castle. Release him at once. Eddard Stark said as he pointed at Hoster Tully, and for God's sake someone send his children back to their rooms. Eddard Stark lifted Lysa off the block himself and muttered soothing words before placing her in Caitlyn's grasp. He murmured something to Hoster's three children and they nodded and went on their way, albeit shadowed by 6 Stark guards. Eddard Stark turned to him then and made his way over. Count yourself very lucky, Lord Tully, Eddard growled. If I had have been even 1 second later you would be mourning a daughter right now. Then the young man sighed and seemed to collapse in on himself. For the first time since seeing him, Hoster was struck by how young the man was. He was barely older than Caitlyn and had borne more grief in his short time than most men did in their entire lives. Why couldn't you have just worked with us? He asked as he rubbed his brow. Lock him in his chambers. Eddard Stark said as he turned away, and get his brother from the cells. Hoster was dragged away by some more Stark soldiers, and suddenly noticed how many there were. How did he get so many men into here and so quickly as well as quietly? Common sense told him that it was impossible, but that was not the story his eyes were singing. Hours later, the door clicked open and Eddard Stark stepped into his chambers. He glanced at the young man before switching his gaze to the window again. Eddard Stark crossed the room and sat down in the chair across from him. He took a goblet from the table and filled it with wine before taking a long sip and sighing appreciatively. I've managed to talk him down for now, he said. Hoster switched his gaze back to the young lord. He was really going to kill her. He was. Why? Eddard sighed. Ever since he returned from King's Landing he's been different. More bloodthirsty, more consumed, more driven. You stood in his way and he saw an outlet for his anger. So he took it. I'm sorry. It's a bit late for that now. I know. The two men sat in comfortable silence for a minute before Eddard Stark stirred again. There are conditions to continued peace. What are they? Hoster asked, half fearing the terms. Your children will be sent to Winterfell until the war is over, officially for safety and fostering, actually as hostages to ensure your continued good behavior. But Catelyn's pregnant. Travel could damage her health. I know. And I'm sorry, but he insisted. In truth, he wants to execute you all and install your brother as lord until Brandon's son comes of age. The terms I have now are the best I can offer you. Are there any other terms? Yes. You will call your banners and fight beside us. You will fight beside us because your children's lives will depend upon it. I can do that. Eddard sighed heavily now. The final term is that, you will be castrated. Castrated? Yes. Whatever for? So that you don't just remarry and have another child. No. Hoster cried. To hold his children hostage was one thing, but to castrate him was another thing entirely. It was barbaric, cruel and downright insulting. The alternative, Lord Tully, is the heads of all your children and a marauding northern army swamping through your lands. No. I am a man of honor. Hoster cried in protest. Eddard Stark's stance shifted and he glared at Hoster coldly. Do I need remind you that you broke guest right? Eddard Stark stood to his feet. You have till tomorrow to accept the terms. If you haven't accepted by then, I will let my father go by his original plan. He strode away but paused at the door. Believe me when I say that is something none of us want to see implemented. Chapter 26, Robert III, Stony September. Notes. A few people are complaining about last chapter and Rickard's decision to have Hoster castrated. There are a few reasons why he did this and not send him to the wall. Firstly, having Hoster working with them minus his testicles is better than having a Hoster with his testicles not working with them at the wall. Second, if Rickard takes his ability to procreate, his is totally reliant on his children's living if he wishes to continue his line, children which Rickard Stark currently holds hostage. No, Rickard does not need Hoster, but it makes it easier. If Rickard has to do a B, C, D, Hoster has the ability to negate B, limiting his workload. Chapter text. Robert rushed through the darkened streets and into the building that was shrouded in shadows. He glanced at the hill overlooking the town and his heart plummeted in his chest. The hill was crawling with soldiers, and even in the dim light of the setting sun, the three-headed dragon of House Targaryen flew from their rippling banners. He turned to the man next to him, a loyal knight who had been with him since he had left Storm's End. Go. He said as he clasped him in a bear hug. Get Ned. Tell him where we are. We'll hide until he arrives. The knight looked at him in regret before nodding once and turning away, rushing down to the street to mount his horse and ride away. Robert wondered if he'd ever see him again. He shook his head and gestured for his men to follow. The men he had left Storm's End with were all gone, apart from these last loyal few. He had sent the remains of his army northeast and fled northwest himself in the hope that Connington would pursue him rather than his army. Thankfully, the fool had played into his hands and pursued him, allowing his army to link up with Ned and Jon's. Now all he had to do was wait here until Ned could send a force to relieve him. Peace. A voice said, and Robert looked up to see a topless woman peering down at him. He burst into a grin. Well, aren't you a pretty one? Robert whispered back. The lady blushed, before gesturing for him to come in. Maybe he could hide here for a while. It would certainly be better than hiding in a field as he was originally going to do. Chapter 27, Rickard 4, The Hellfire Within. Notes. All right, I'm sorry for the lack of updates. No excuses. Just couldn't be bothered for a bit. Rickard's last chapter, yes, the one where he ordered Hoster's balls cut off, took a lot out of me. Anyway, I'm back, and hopefully here to stay. Enjoy and tell me what you think. Chapter text. Ricard watched from the shadows as the great hall of Riverrun slowly filled with the ilk they called the Riverlords. The worst of them was approaching him now, Lord Walder Free. Lord Stark. Lord Free called as he hobbled over, a lecherous grin plastered over his weasel-like face. I heard you received quite the warm reception from old King Aesai. The old man cackled at his own joke, while Ricard snarled silently. That's all right though, the old man continued, you have another don't you? Not as many as me mind you, but then nobody does these days. Hey. Ricard walked away before he punched the obnoxious man going to speak to with Tytos Blackwood, a man he considered a personal friend. Lord Stark, Lord Blackwood greeted solemnly as he approached him. Let me offer my condolences for your loss, Lord Stark. Ricard nodded gratefully. Tytos glanced around at the other lords before leaning in close. What happened with Lord Tully? He whispered. Ricard glared at the mentioned lord who was occupying himself at the front of the hall with his son,